The morning sun brightly illuminated the facade of a high-rise office building. The hero worked with concentration, remembering the strange events of the previous evening. The man quickly typed, trying to drown out his disturbing thoughts. A magical window suddenly appeared in front of him, causing him great fear. The amazed guy looked at the interface of the store with ordinary canned goods. The system rejected the purchase of tuna due to a complete lack of coins. In the catalog, the hero saw a heavy hammer for crushing skulls. The guy imagined a bloody apocalypse. The tired worker dismissed the visions as a simple hallucination due to overwork. The enraged boss burst into the department, shouting Song Jin-sung's name. The enraged boss loomed over Jinsun, demanding that he confess his current thoughts. The man then slammed the table hard, expressing his indignation at the call from the company. The hero silently reflected on someone else's incompetence and the constant hysterics of a loser. The boss came close to his subordinate, continuing to shout out his endless complaints. The boss loomed over him menacingly, asking if the boy was ready to continue snapping back. The aggressive shouter suddenly stopped short, noticing a beautiful woman entering the office. The charming Soka kindly offered a drink, sincerely wanting to lift everyone's spirits. The rude man's face instantly turned red with delight at the sight of his sweet colleague. The man immediately changed his anger to mercy, promising the girl to calm down completely. The boss unceremoniously grabbed Soka by the hand, inviting them to have dinner together in the evening. The head of the department pressed himself against Soka in a disgusting manner, causing her disgust. The girl politely declined the offer, citing a previously scheduled meeting. The annoyed chief reluctantly retreated, and Soka bowed after him with relief. Left alone with the hero, the colleague sighed heavily because of the boss's madness. Jinsun sincerely thanked his savior for helping him in his dispute with his boss. Watching the plane, the boy desperately dreamed of being back home as soon as possible. The hero was angry with his boss, recognizing Soka's decisive role in the quarrel. Smoking on the roof, Jinsun reflected on the difficulties of leaving the company. The guy smiled warmly, planning to bring his kind colleague a cup of coffee later. Suddenly, Soka ran up and called out to the deputy, interrupting his quiet thoughts on the street. The guy asked what brought non-smoking Sona to the roof of the building. The girl replied that she simply came to hide from the department head. Colleagues in the office were actively discussing how the contractors suddenly ran away. The interlocutors noted that it had become too cold outside for summer. Sona showed goosebumps on her skin, complaining about the abnormal cold. The young man laughed at her excessive sensitivity to the cold. Shocking news about snow in Africa was published on social media. The guy froze in amazement, looking at the screen of someone else's smartphone. The heroes acknowledged that the situation in the world had become truly strange. An urgent warning about the onset of a cold wave was sent to phones. The Ministry of Emergency Situations sent an official message about a sharp drop in summer air temperatures. The heroes considered the emergency warning about frosts in June a stupid joke. The first small cold snowflake suddenly fell onto the girl's open palm. Sona screamed at the sharp cold that suddenly touched her skin. The office workers looked up and saw snow with horror. The snowfall instantly paralyzed city streets, creating huge traffic jams and accidents. The guy with coffee in his hands acknowledged the final madness of the world around him. The hero became worried about the growing traffic jams and decided to quickly go home. The elevator in the office building suddenly got stuck and stopped opening its doors. The young man began to shiver violently from the sudden cold that had descended upon the room. The guy walked up the stairs, remembering yesterday's strange status window. He was shaking violently and cursing at the crazy summer weather. The hero noticed that the elevator doors began to close by themselves. The young man assumed that the elevator in the building had completely broken down. He became suspicious because the elevator doors were operating too quietly. The sudden darkness and power outage greatly alarmed the boy. The hero decided to quickly clean up and leave the empty building as quickly as possible. The silence was suddenly broken by someone's heavy and very strange wheezing. Covered in goosebumps, the boy wanted to immediately pack his things and run away. The young man walked cautiously through the dark office to his desk. The young man remembered his remaining colleagues, looking around in the empty office. Terrible thoughts began to haunt the hero in the frightening darkness of the night room. The guy was surprised by the disorder on the tables and the sudden disappearance of all the employees. He suspected the people were fleeing hastily and called loudly for someone alive. The silence and strange sounds scared the young man to the depths of his soul. The hero grabbed his backpack and decided to immediately get out of the cursed building. The shadow of a creepy monster appeared behind the unsuspecting guy. The panic-stricken young man rushed away through the dark workrooms. The hero's gaze froze on the meeting room, where something very dangerous was clearly hidden. The guy came across a bloody employee pass lying right on the floor. The hero picked up a bloody pass with the name of employee Kim Hyun-suk. The boy screamed in horror, trying to understand the reasons for this bloody massacre. The young man peered fearfully through the thin blinds into the darkness of the neighboring office. In the depths of the dark office, he noticed something eerie and froze. Bloodshot red eyes glared at him from the darkness. A huge black monster in an office suit greedily devoured a human body. The stunned guy cursed, not believing in the reality of this terrible nightmare. The creature turned around, revealing a bloody mouth with sharp white teeth. A former colleague turned into a zombie with a crazy look and claws. Their eyes met and a heavy, deathly silence fell over the room. The guy was stunned after that. The young man realized in horror that in front of him was a real, living zombie. The hero ran as fast as he could, escaping from his fierce pursuer. The guy was breathing heavily and cursing, not believing the madness that was happening. The young man turned around sharply, sensing a new threat behind him. The hero lifted a heavy chair and attacked the monster with a scream. The boy delivered a powerful blow, throwing the bloody monster aside. The monster fell to the floor, and the young man quickly rushed away. The hero ran quickly through the dark office, saving his life. The mad creature with glowing eyes continued its furious pursuit of the guy. The guy held the door with all his might, trying to escape the monster. The monster furiously pounded the barrier, trying to break through to him. The young man breathed heavily, realizing the mortal danger of his situation. A terrible wheezing sound behind the door made the hero freeze in horror. The hero hid around the corner, watching the movements of the bloody zombie. Someone's hand suddenly grabbed the edge of the dark office partition. The guy shuddered, feeling the presence of an enemy behind his back. A sudden mobile phone signal almost gave away the young man's location. He clutched his head, wondering about the nature of the fury that had gripped the world. The bloodthirsty monster attacked swiftly, giving no time to think. Jinsen sat in the darkness and wondered about the reasons for the chaos that was happening. The hero suspected a connection between the ongoing madness and yesterday's mysterious status window. The smartphone screen suddenly became covered with thick ripples and very strange interference. The brunette pressed the display in confusion, not understanding the true reasons for the failure. The connection was completely lost, and Jinsen didn't know what to do now. The office worker clutched his head, realizing the inevitability of his imminent death. The boy began to tremble violently from the sharp cold that penetrated to his very bones. Jinsen realized that he would freeze to death before the hostile monsters arrived. The hero set a goal to stay in the building until rescuers arrived. Jinsen noted that the phone's charge should last for 2 days. The hero looked around cautiously, noticing the exit sign in the darkness. Jinsen resolutely commanded himself to move on, brightly illuminating the path with his flashlight. The guy found no signs of people and confirmed his complete loneliness. The brunette began to carefully search the office drawers in the hope of finding something useful. Inside one of the tables there was a completely clean and warm shirt. The hero quickly changed his clothes and immediately felt the long-awaited surge of new strength. Jinsen persistently continued to search for food, combing every workstation in the office. Suddenly the guy came across someone else's abandoned bag and was very happy. The backpack they found contained food, water, and a soft blanket. The hero put on the backpack, sincerely thanking its unknown owner for his help. Jinsen entered the office and began looking for an item for self-defense. The guy swore quietly, carefully opening another door in the dark corridor. The brunette found the deputy director's leather bag and slung it over his shoulder. Next to the bag was a case filled with heavy-duty golf clubs. The hero wrapped himself tightly in a blanket, hoping to hold out for at least 3 days. Jinsen walked to the window and silently stared at the icy snowstorm. The streets below were teeming with zombies, amid burning cars and deep snowdrifts. The snowstorm has become so strong that the rescue helicopter will definitely not arrive. Jinsen sat down on the floor, afraid of having to wait a whole week. The office worker began to shiver violently as the building became much colder. Jinsen opened his eyes and saw a flickering shop window in front of him. The hero noticed a warm jacket for 3 coins in the list of goods. The boy was puzzled as he thought about ways to obtain the necessary magic coins. The tired office worker began to slowly fall into a deep sleep. The hero's eyelids closed from unbearable fatigue and icy cold. A lonely silhouette of a guy stood frozen at the snow-covered window of a dark office. The sudden, distinct sound of someone else's footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. Jinsen was sitting on the stairs when he heard someone approaching from above. The hero instantly tensed, sensing the breath of mortal danger very close. The brunette jumped up abruptly, realizing the presence of a living dead man in the room. Jinsen swung the heavy golf club furiously to strike. The door handle suddenly twitched, breaking the tense silence of the empty corridor. The unknown man quickly started running away from the impending threat. The brunette prepared to attack, raising his improvised weapon high into the air. A frightened colleague ran out to meet the guy and loudly shouted a request to stop. Jinsong froze when Kim Juman recognized him as Sun's assistant. The hero lowered his club, recognizing the survivor as a familiar office bully. A colleague told of a nightmare that took place behind the door of his break room. The man boasted of his foresight, and Jinsen asked about an escape route. The companion described a foolish escape, and Jinsen recognized it as absolutely useless. Kim Ju-man got down to business and turned to Assistant Sun. The man admitted to being hungry and asked the guy for some food. Jinsen refused to give him rations, but agreed to give his colleague some water. The boy went to get water, hearing words of gratitude in response. Kim Ju-man suddenly grabbed Jinsong's hand and stopped him abruptly. The companion, with a crazy face, asked again about the presence of food in the bag. Jinsen sensed something was wrong and noticed his colleague's strange behavior. The hero filled the thermos and felt growing anxiety about the situation. Jinsen noticed profuse sweat on his companion's shirt despite the cold. The guy washed his face and wondered if he was being too picky. The zombie suddenly pounced on the guy, knocking him onto the cold floor. Jinsen hit the mutant hard in the face with a heavy metal thermos. The hero furiously threw the monster away from himself with one powerful kick. The former colleague flew back against the wall with a terrible crash from the impact. The brunette was horrified by the sudden transformation of an ordinary man into a bloodthirsty monster. The office worker gripped the golf club decisively with both hands. Jinsen delivered a crushing blow to the head of his former comrade. The guy mercilessly finished off the enemy, through clenched teeth ordering him to finally die. Blood spattered copiously across the cold walls after a series of fatal, furious blows. Jinsen breathed heavily over the corpse, realizing the full horror of the new reality. The sudden message about receiving the coin greatly puzzled the exhausted hero. Jinsen stared in shock at the status window flickering in front of him. 1 coin for killing a monster seemed like a pitiful reward to the guy. The hero sank to his knees, exhausted, among the bloody office walls. The brunette peered gloomily into the darkness, realizing the gravity of his situation. The guy discovered a distinct bite mark on the hand of his defeated opponent. Jinsen sighed heavily, revealing the frightening secret of his colleague's rapid transformation. The tired worker lit a cigarette, reflecting on the deceptiveness of the ordinary human appearance. The cigarettes found in someone else's bag became the guy's only consolation. The hero wrapped the blanket more tightly around himself and carefully moved on. A survivor desperately fought off a crowd of zombies on the street with a bat. A pack of monsters instantly surrounded and tore apart the unfortunate victim in the snow. The body was left lying in the bloody snow among hungry predators. A mutilated corpse with torn clothes lay frozen in a deep snowdrift. The guy looked gloomily at the raging snowstorm outside the cold window glass. The office worker leaned back in his chair wearily, losing hope. It's the 3rd day of survival, and the phone's battery is almost dead. The hero checked his backpack, where only cookies and candy bars remained. Jinsen realized that everyone who tried to go outside had died. The brunette resolutely tightened the straps of his bag and prepared for the sortie. Jinsen lifted the table, deciding not to wait for his death any longer. The guy decided to find reliable people to escape to the outside together. The hero went to the 6th floor to check Kim Chu-man's words. The brunette suddenly stopped in the corridor, noticing a bright glare ahead. The light suddenly turned on, causing Jinsen to scream joyfully in surprise. The office instantly filled with radiance, contrary to all the expectations of the exhausted hero. The guy pressed himself against the glass, trying to see something through the snowstorm. Outside, the icy wind continued to cover the city with thick snow. The office worker felt a spark of hope ignite in his heart. Jinsen realized that someone had managed to start a powerful emergency generator. The hero realized the presence of a survivor and prepared for an immediate search. Jinsen entered the passage, fearing the sudden loss of dim light. Having equipped himself, the guy firmly decided to find the people before dark. The office worker headed towards the 1st floor, hoping to meet security. Overcoming his heavy breathing, the athletic brunette tightly pulled the laces of his sneakers. Jinsen crept down the steps, trying not to attract the monsters. Having passed the 6th floor, the survivor froze warily, listening to the silence. The hero cautiously peered into the opening, deciding to conduct a reconnaissance of the premises. The guy's gaze fell upon a passage tightly blocked by a pile of furniture. Jinsen was visibly inspired by the find, planning to return to his colleagues later. The guy was afraid that the 1st floor might be teeming with bloodthirsty red monsters. Clinging to the crack, the survivor passionately wished not to meet a single one. Seeing the bloody chaos, the guy cursed loudly through his teeth in hopelessness. A huge crowd of zombies blocked the way out of the madness. Jinsen realized the impossibility of escape and noted the security of the locked outer doors. The enraged monsters beat furiously against the glass, threatening to destroy the fragile barrier. Relying on his speed, the guy dashed away from the dangerous lobby at lightning speed. The hero slipped into the control room, trying to find at least some shelter. Jinsen recognized the frozen body as his colleague, who always smiled kindly. The boy looked at the frostbite victim with bitterness. With a trembling hand, Jinsen carefully closed the unfortunate man's eyelids, saying goodbye to the deceased. Bowing his head, Jin-sung whispered a wish for rest in peace in the office. Trying not to make any noise, the guy tiptoed further down the corridor. The last chance to find survivors was the locked steel security room. The hero decided to make his presence known so as not to provoke an attack from the people. A terrible groan around the corner made Jin-sung grip the handle of his weapon tighter. The bloodthirsty creatures continued their hunt, showing absolutely no mercy. Mindful of the creature's keen hearing, the survivor slowed down every movement as much as possible. With difficulty catching his breath, the guy carefully opened the door to the room. What he saw inside made the hero freeze in silent shock, barely able to contain himself. Jin-sung clashed with the stranger in a furious hand-to-hand combat. The hero suddenly froze, hearing a sharp, suspicious sound from the depths of the room. The bespectacled man gritted his teeth and expressed his determination to fight to the death. A bloody monster appeared ahead as the survivors tried to hide behind the door. Jin-sung swung his stick, trying to ward off an attack from an invisible enemy. The opponents stood guard against each other, assessing their chances of salvation. The suspicious stranger sullenly asked if the guy he had met was human. The man explained his appearance by turning on the generator and searching for other survivors. Jin-sung showed his work ID, confirming his identity as an ordinary office worker. The assistant manager introduced himself to his colleague, offering to use a blanket to cover the wounds. Jin-sung noted the lack of sweat in his interlocutor, suspecting the beginning of a dangerous transformation. The guy lowered his club, trying to show peaceful intentions to his new acquaintance. The survivor's attention was drawn to a forgotten backpack lying on the table in the room. The broken wooden blade looked dangerous in the stranger's hands. The hero reasoned that the absence of a mad hunger proved the stranger's purity of mind. The opponent reeled in surprise as the situation suddenly took a completely new turn. Jin-sung frantically thought about how exactly he could quickly defuse the dangerous situation that had arisen. The office worker carefully reached into his bag to remove the bloody sports stick. The man in glasses fell into a heavy silence, pondering his opponent's words. Jin-sung raised his hands, reminiscent of the shared smoke breaks during peacetime. The hero decided to offer a cigarette to at least slightly relieve the current tension. Choi looked puzzled as he watched Jin-sung's hands move to the side. A red pack of strong cigarettes suddenly appeared in the hands of this employee. Jin-sung politely asked if his new acquaintance would like a smoke. The man in glasses looked at the pack of cigarettes silently and thoughtfully. Choi continued to grip his sharp wooden blade tightly with both hands. The researcher thought for a moment, weighing this unexpected and friendly offer. The survivor finally agreed to take the offered cigarette from his new colleague. Both men sat down, feeling that life still had meaning. Jin-sung noted that taking a smoke break together helped them finally relax. Jin-sung admitted that he only managed to eat half of his small bar. The guy wondered if his new acquaintance had taken food from the room. Choi confidently broke apart a brick of dry noodles over his open backpack. The interlocutor handed over half of the food, advising Jin-sung to chew it properly. The office worker began to greedily devour the dry food with obvious surprise. Jin-sung inquired about the results of the inspection of the second floor and the now useless refrigerator. The young man concentrated on crunching on noodles, trying to at least slightly satisfy his hunger. The survivors smiled bitterly, remembering their past hopes for kitchen appliances. Jin-sung asked about the second floor, receiving a bitter disappointment in response. Choi recalled how he and a colleague divided their meager supplies equally. Choi recalled his partner insisting on moving but refusing. The colleague went outside and instantly turned into a mad red monster. The survivor in glasses reported grimly about 4 monsters in the corridor. When the phone finally ran out of battery, the man had to leave his safe haven. Choi crawled out, constantly distracting the predators by throwing various small objects. Jin-sung sincerely admired his colleague's daring escape from a group of dangerous zombies. An office worker asked if it was Choi who had actually started the emergency generator. The heroes carefully examined the old extension cord that served them for emergency charging. Jin-sung was skeptical about the real meaning of using almost useless gadgets. Choi was completely horrified by his partner's lack of internet access. Choi suddenly delighted his partner with news about the operation of his satellite internet. Jin-sung was even taken aback when he heard about Starlink from the great Elon Musk. A colleague clarified that only a couple of communities survived on the network. A kind partner offered to charge my dead phone with his powerful charger. The guy began to greedily look through the messages of other people on the survivors' network. Jin-sung thanked his colleague from the bottom of his heart for the new information. The guys just sat in the dark while their gadgets accumulated interest. The heroes exhaled sadly, looking at the ceiling in this office. Choi warned grimly that the noisy generator was almost out of fuel. The colleague stood up abruptly and asked what Jin-sung intended to do next. Choi was firm in his decision to remain in the safety of his office. A colleague suspiciously asked if the guy really wanted to kick him out. The man realized that in his current state, he would only become a burden to his partner. Jin-sung decided that now this fellow traveler would only interfere with the mission. The hero directly declared the need to part ways in order to continue the dangerous reconnaissance mission. The bespectacled partner humbly accepted the bitter truth about their separation. The man began to rummage through his things quickly, wanting to leave something in return. The stranger handed over a flashlight, calling this important item his parting gift. Jinsen sincerely thanked for the generous gift, calling the equipment a true treasure. The former ally silently handed over the equipment, preparing to leave this refuge forever. Jinsen handed his partner the battery and heard words of gratitude in response. Leaving on a dangerous sortie, the hero briefly said that it was time for him to go. In response, the bespectacled man wished the daredevil good luck in his risky undertaking. Jinsen promised to meet again if they both managed to survive today. The boy hurried away, fearing a sudden power outage in the dark building. Jinsen noted with relief that the glass door was holding back the crowd for now. Clutching his stick, Jinsen prepared to meet any new threat. The hero quietly closed the door behind him, trying not to attract attention. He remembered the official car, hoping to leave in it as soon as possible. Jinsen froze on the stairs, wondering if his sudden escape was the right thing to do. Jinsen decided to go upstairs first to scout out the current dangerous situation. The hero planned to gather as much information as possible before leaving for good. Clutching his stick tightly, the boy carefully began his climb up the stairs. The sudden darkness made him curse and suspect that the emergency power had been cut off. Trying to remain calm, Jinsen began frantically searching for a flashlight in his bag. A beam of light from the found device finally cut through the thick darkness of the corridor. The hero moved forward slowly, fearing a sudden change of position by the bloodthirsty zombies. Jinsen encouraged himself with the thought that there was little time left until he reached his cherished goal. Hearing a strange noise from above, Jinsen realized the proximity of the monster lurking there. The hero gripped his weapon tighter, realizing that there was absolutely no way to retreat. Jinsen was determined to break through the deadly danger lurking right above. The hero left the lantern on the floor to free his hands for the fight. The figure of a bloodied woman in torn clothes appeared on the stairwell. Jinsen noticed that the monster was distracted by the noise coming from the roof. He decided to immediately take advantage of this rare chance for a surprise attack. The zombie's face was disfigured, and its eyes burned with a thirst for human flesh. Gritting his teeth, the athletic brunette made a sharp lunge towards his opponent. The creature suddenly leaped forward, causing Jinsen to curse loudly in anger. The guy swung the stick with all his might, aiming straight at the head. The powerful blow threw the creature against the wall, leaving splashes on the tiles. The wounded creature let out a piercing scream that echoed throughout the dark corridor. Jinsen swung his club furiously and commanded the dangerous monster to die immediately. A powerful blow took off the enemy's head, drenching the cold floor with thick blood. Breathing heavily, the hero wondered in horror if she was dead. The brunette noticed with a shudder that the fallen woman was still moving. Jinsen delivered the finishing blow while the zombie barely audibly begged for mercy. A notification about receiving 1 coin for winning appeared before my eyes. The hero studied the system interface that appeared out of thin air with disgust. The guy picked up a broken weapon part, deciding to take it with him. Looking at the corpse, Jinsen thought hard about the source of this zombie's appearance. The brunette discovered a closed door and assumed that an enemy had appeared from the floor. Jinsen cautiously noted the high probability of danger on the 7th floor. The hero breathed a sigh of relief, noticing the temporary absence of monsters in the dark corridor. The tired boy greedily drank cold water from his canteen. Jinsen remembered the incredible speed of the creature that almost killed him. He compared the habits of the mad monster with the movements of a wild forest animal. The hero realized the need for numerical superiority or the creation of conditions for a fair duel. Jinsen decided to search the internet for fresh information about zombie species. The guy opened a survivors forum, where he saw many new disturbing messages. He read a post about the terrible frost and the last person bitten. Jinsen learned about the high sensitivity of these zombies to loud sounds. The hero realized that the monster's bite would inevitably turn him into a monster. The news feed showed only desperate cries from survivors for immediate help. The sight of the burning city finally convinced the guy of the complete collapse of the government. Jinsen realized his complete loneliness and the need to survive completely independently. On the 5th day of survival, the unbearable cold caused him to fall ill. To avoid dying from a cold, the hero began to actively exercise. The guy greedily ate the chocolate bar, trying to get more of the necessary calories. Jinsen sighed heavily, realizing that it was impossible to get used to such abnormal cold. He decided to leave his shoes in the office to ensure his silence. Jinsen wanted to find some normal food before the situation got worse. According to a colleague, there is still half of the food left in the break room. All the supplies were inside the bag of the employee, who had now become a bloodthirsty zombie. The main problem was the presence of at least 4 monsters in that room. Jinsen immediately realized that it was impossible to steal the bag from these creatures without being noticed. He decided to lure out the enemies one by one for their safe elimination. One of the monsters was located in the very first room of the development department. Another infected employee was standing in the second room of this office. Jinsen noticed a third opponent in the new business sector team. The brunette wondered about the fate of his colleague, not finding any bodies on the way. The hero crouched down and realized the acute shortage of suitable weapons for the battle. The guy looked into the office and was pleased to note the absence of monsters. Jinsen crept cautiously into the room, clutching his old club tightly. The hero smiled contentedly, because he finally found his new inventory. There were signs of a struggle and fresh stains of enemy blood on the floor. Jinsen walked down the corridor with concentration, keeping an eye out for any possible enemy ambush. The guy clamped the flashlight between his teeth to completely free both hands. Jinsen took out a heavy metal object, hoping that it would provide reliable protection. The hero threw the trash can forward to lure the enemies away with a loud noise. The object fell with a crash onto the tiles, attracting the attention of the lurking monsters. An infected person suddenly jumped out of the shadows and furiously rushed at Jinsen. The monster's face was frozen in a terrible grimace, reflecting his eternal hunger. Jinsen met the enemy with a powerful blow of his stick, not allowing him to get closer. The boy jumped back sharply as another creature tried to grab him. In the depths of the corridor, silhouettes of new zombies appeared, attracted by the loud noise. The hero desperately blocked the door with his shoulder, holding back the onslaught of two creatures at once. Jinsen breathed a sigh of relief, managing to lock the lock in front of the enemy's nose in time. With difficulty catching his breath, he noted the complete fulfillment of his plan. Jinsen realized that victory was near, planning to lure out the remaining zombies one by one. The brunette got into a fighting stance, preparing for the final clearing of the floor. The zombie grabbed the hero's leg as he tried to carefully retreat. Jinsen dropped the flashlight and dealt a powerful blow to the enemy with a heavy boot. The guy pushed away the bloody hand to quickly break this deadly distance. The athletic brunette's eyes flashed an ominous red light from a fit of rage. The hero brought the club down with all his might on the head of the monster lurking below. Jinsen exhaled heavily and grabbed his head with his hand in horror. The office worker froze next to a gruesome bloody imprint on the wall. Jinsen noted to himself that there were only two people left in the corridor. The boy raised the bloody flashlight to illuminate the dark corridor again. The hero vowed to finish the cleanup before the rest of the bloodthirsty office creatures arrived. The bloody hockey stick on the dirty floor became a silent witness to the recent nightmare. The heavy metal met the jaw of this mad monster with a crunch. The spoon suddenly plunged into the rotten throat, cutting off this disgusting squeal. The nightmarish creatures in the office corridor greedily reached out their paws to Jinsen. The zombie bared his teeth furiously, showing the guy his sharp and bloody fangs. The mutilated dead man, with the last of his strength, desperately crawled towards his spoon. The creature with the backpack suddenly froze and slowly turned towards the noise. Jinsen raised his stick furiously over his head for the final killing blow. The guy exhaled heavily, looking at the system notification about 4 coins. Jinsen sadly realized that this broken stick would no longer be useful. Jinsen quickly tightened the tight straps of his new and very roomy backpack. The guy assessed the weight of the loot and immediately realized that the load was heavy. Left completely without a weapon, the hero resolutely moved along the dark corridor. He decided to carefully examine each office in search of resources. Jinsen remembered his colleagues who had barricaded themselves in a distant break room. The guy found a really great place to search and smiled at his luck. In the development department, the hero finally came across valuable vitamins and a power bank. Riding the wave of incredible success, Jinsen continued to dashingly open office doors. The hero entered the second team's lair hoping for a very rich catch. The sudden noise made the boy flinch and remember that he had no weapon. Jinsen quickly rushed away, realizing the fatal danger of any accidental collision. The guy finally caught his breath and wearily sank down onto the cold floor. The hero smiled bitterly at the strange feeling of imaginary security in the empty office. A heavy sigh escaped the lips of the hero, completely exhausted by the long struggle. Jinsen began to examine the contents of his heavy backpack with undisguised curiosity. Chips, the treasured choco pie, and cans of cool soda fell to the floor. A mad and loud laugh suddenly shook the tired body of this guy. Jinsen happily realized that the supplies he had found would be enough for a month. The guy suddenly became serious, warily listening to every rustle behind the door. The adrenaline finally subsided, and a strong, icy shudder ran through the hero's body. Jinsen shivered from the bitter cold as he washed his bare feet with water. The boy suddenly noticed frightening black marks on his wounded ankle. The terrible thought of a possible infection made the hero freeze in horror. The moment when the zombie's claws dangerously slashed his leg flashed before his eyes. Jinsen frantically checked the conditions for turning into a bloodthirsty monster on his phone. A system notification confirmed that a common scratch does not pose a mortal threat. The hero cried out joyfully, realizing his truly fantastic luck in hell. The guy smiled contentedly and wrapped himself more tightly in his warm cloak. However, Jinsen soon realized that the mortal dangers were not over yet. Severe frostbite of the extremities required urgent warming to save the hero's life. Jinsen frantically opened the store, finding 6 honestly earned coins inside. The guy immediately remembered that clothes had previously been on the available list. The hero looked at the expensive winter gear on the screen with obvious annoyance. Jinsen was outraged by the exorbitant price of the boots, but there was simply no choice. A pair of cozy fur boots instantly materialized right in front of the frozen guy. Jinsen was genuinely amazed at the reality of the shoes he had just bought. The new boots fit the hero perfectly and kept him pleasantly warm. The guy doubted that ordinary shoes would help him fully regain his strength. Jinsen began frantically searching the store for something even more useful. Suddenly, the hero's gaze caught on one extremely important system object. Jinsen finally felt warmth and began to come to his senses little by little. Just imagine, 1 coin for a hot water bottle seemed like a really crazy price to Jinsen. The guy felt the long-awaited beat of life in his body with wild relief. On the 7th day of survival, our hero discovered that the tap was dry. Jinsen sadly realized that now even ordinary water was gone. He checked the supplies and found only 2 liters of clean drinking water. The guy understood that this measly portion would be enough for 4 days. Tired, Jinsen simply collapsed onto the bed, cursing his hard lot. Lying on the cold sofa, the guy feverishly checked the news on his smartphone. Jinsen was determined to fight his way to the supermarket through the crowds of bloodthirsty zombies. An anonymous online user anxiously asked an unknown author about leaving. The author replied that he was running and received sincere wishes for his survival. Jinsen sadly scrolled through his feed, noticing the alarming decrease in the number of new posts. Our hero gloomily assumed that most of his colleagues had finally perished. Jinsen stared gloomily into the void, not seeing any traces of survivors. The guy consoled himself with the hope that the rest of the people were simply safely hidden. The hero realized the fatality of waiting, despite the presence of water and food. Jinsen was determined to seek allies, fearing the inevitable death of his own accord. To make the dangerous exit into the corridor, the guy needed to get hold of an effective weapon. The last remaining golf club looked like a fragile defense against the monsters. The store offered a powerful hammer, but the hero was desperately short of coins. Jinsen was upset, because for 5 coins you can buy warm clothes. The guy decided to check the neighboring floors, hoping to find useful resources there. Suddenly, the hero froze, sensing something was wrong in the oppressive silence of the dark office. The empty room frightened Jinsen with the complete absence of any living people. The guy discovered frightening traces of someone's spilled blood on his office desk. The pungent and nauseating smell made the hero involuntarily shudder with disgust. Jinsen immediately realized that this terrible stench was coming from the zombies. The guy was puzzled why there was blood everywhere, but no corpses. A sudden noise behind him made the hero turn sharply towards the source. He stood frozen in front of the closed door, wondering about the survivor lurking inside. Jinsen listened intently to the eerie silence that reigned beyond the dark opening. The guy decisively pushed the door and quickly entered the office space. Suddenly he felt a strange presence and turned back sharply, shuddering. In front of him lay a mountain of bloody bodies, causing the hero to swear foully. An office worker counted about 10 corpses lying in thick blood. He pondered the power of the mysterious monster, which could become a powerful ally. Traces of a search in the offices confirmed that a dangerous competitor had gotten ahead of him. A sharp thought seared his mind, causing his face to contort with rage. The light of the flashlight illuminated an empty storage facility, from which the looters had taken absolutely everything. The hero looked at the empty plates, surprised at how carefully someone had collected everything. Jinsen filled his mug, hoping that the group of survivors had not yet left. Suddenly, the guy saw a note lying right next to the spout of the cold cooler. He carefully read Hyukjae's message, which advised him to avoid the dangerous 5th floor. Jinsen cursed, realizing that he had missed the former Special Forces soldier just yesterday. He noticed strange notes on the back of an old, crumpled sheet of paper. The short phrase at the end of the message caused a bitter smile on the hero's face. On the 10th day of survival, Jinsen sat wrapped in a warm blanket. Jinsen chewed on a cookie, wondering why he couldn't go to the principal's office. He understood that an experienced military man would not have issued a warning in vain. He sighed heavily, realizing that the situation was becoming more and more hopeless. Since yesterday, the guy has not met a single living person. The chances of finding allies were rapidly melting away with every minute of agonizing waiting. Jinsen decided to check other floors to avoid missing out on new opportunities. He wondered how many more rooms he had to search alone. A sudden bright glare from the window opposite made him instantly wary. The hero ran to the glass, realizing that someone was giving him a signal. In the building opposite, he actually saw the silhouette of another surviving person. The stranger acted strangely, trying to attract Jinsen's attention in any way. The boy tried to make out the gestures, but the distance made it difficult to understand the gist of the message. He threw a blanket over his shoulders, deciding to go to meet the survivor. The guy carefully examined the mysterious message through the thick glass of the office window. A neighbor reported people on the floors, suggesting that they join forces. Jinsen was delighted by the news of survivors, planning to immediately begin a search operation. The hero gripped his metal club tightly, preparing for another dangerous attack. The office worker walked cautiously into the dark corridor, lighting the way with a flashlight. He was surprised by the unlocked entrance, suspecting that other people had cleared the passage. The guy loudly called out to his colleagues, hoping to meet acquaintances from his company. Jinsen moved forward slowly, trying not to make any unnecessary suspicious noise. The hero discovered complete disarray, as if someone had deliberately scattered important papers. Jinsen noticed the terrible disorder, sensing the presence of a dangerous enemy behind him. Then a monster suddenly jumped on him, and the hero met it with a stick. The predator knocked the hero down, furiously trying to bite through his weak improvised defense. Jinsen gritted his teeth, giving all his strength to the fight against the monster. After that, he delivered a powerful kick straight to the stomach. The discarded monster collapsed, the guy hanging heavily over his former colleague. The hero's face was distorted with anger. He was ready to finish off the monster. The mouth of the mad predator was covered in blood, and its empty eyes evoked horror. The enemy froze in a pool of blood, no longer posing any threat. Jinsen exhaled heavily, realizing the fragility of his position in the icy hell. After that, the guy lifted the table up. The hero then received a system coin for the death of a zombie. Jinsen shined his flashlight down the corridor, hoping to find survivors in the office building. He turned around abruptly, realizing the truth of the rumors about the presence of living people. The guy approached the door, promising not to harm those hiding inside. Jinsen suggested joining forces, asking the mysterious stranger at the door to introduce himself. The brunette then stated his position, confirming his status as an ordinary employee. The hero swung his club, intending to break down the locked door in the absence of an answer. Suddenly, from behind the barrier, a question came from whether he was the deputy. The door slowly opened and Jinsen saw a hand extended towards him. The girl in the gray hoodie opened the door while Jin-sung was recognizing his colleague. The survivors sat down at the table, discussing the girl's long stay in the building. Last night, a panicked stranger insistently demanded to be let inside. She refused, but the man sensed the girl's loneliness and forced his way in. Sona hid in the break room, and the attacker came forward an hour later. A terrible roar was heard, frightening the girl to the depths of her soul in the night. Jinsen realized that the monster he had killed was the very same invader. Sona inquired about the presence of weapons, pointing to her homemade wooden spear. The hero looked with bewilderment at the ordinary mop turned into a deadly instrument. Sona confirmed the use of a knife, and Jinsen noticed blood on the blade. The brunette examined the bloody tip of the spear, doubting the strength of the fragile girl. He then assessed the risk of using such an awkward weapon in an apocalypse. The boy thought about the danger from the surviving people in the building. After this, Jinsen got ready to leave, leaving his new acquaintance completely alone. Suddenly, the girl grabbed his hand tightly, not wanting to let go. Sona asked excitedly about his departure, apologizing for her abruptness. She tearfully asked for help, afraid she couldn't cope alone. The girl continued to persistently hold his wrist, hoping for a joint rescue. Sona then confessed to her past passion for fencing for defense. Jinsen was very surprised by what he heard, and the girl demonstrated her determination to fight. Sona announced the clearing of the 6th floor, shocking Jin-sung with her unexpected boldness. She then warned that abandoning such an experienced partner would be a mistake. The hero froze in silence, realizing the scale of this fragile office girl's abilities. Sona won silver at the championship, finally convincing the guy of her usefulness. Soon they shook hands firmly, sealing their new and important alliance. The girl then showed a backpack filled with found food and a pile of clothes. Jinsen immediately asked about the battery, doubting that the connection would be restored soon. The guy then mentioned satellite communications, ordering his partner to immediately gather the equipment. Later, the hero turned around abruptly, clarifying the exact number of monsters she had defeated. Sona calmly counted the zombies she had killed, even mentioning Jinsen's last victim. Sona finally found a spare battery, and Jinsen was counting the dead bodies he had killed. The girl found only 2 batteries and suggested to her partner to leave quickly. However, the guy sharply ordered to wait, noticing strange marks on the floor. Jinsen asked doubtfully about the trace, carefully examining the damaged surface. Sona immediately remembered yesterday's madman who was furiously trying to break down the door. Then the hero began to quickly examine the room in search of the necessary item. Suddenly he cried out with joy when he discovered a heavy caliper in a pile of things. The guy considered the metal tool to be an excellent weapon that would definitely not break. Sona only noted with disappointment the short length of her partner's new baton. After this, the girl smiled slyly and announced her idea. Then Sona suggested tying the found tool tightly to a long stick. Soon she solemnly demonstrated to her partner a homemade spear made from a caliper. After this, the girl handed the weapon to the guy, calling it quite convenient. Jinsen appreciated the double benefit of the homemade weapon, which was suitable for devastating stabbing blows. The hero sincerely thanked his partner, rejoicing at the appearance of a reliable comrade in battle. They soon pooled their food supplies so they no longer had to worry about food. Suddenly, Jinsen took a frying pan out of his backpack, extremely surprised by such a strange find. Sona instantly blushed with shame, trying to justify the extra kitchen item. She later admitted that she wanted to return the item because the color was unsuitable. The guy laughed and noted the usefulness of a frying pan for melting clean snow. The girl then asked Jinsen how he knew about her whereabouts. The hero explained that he had received a message from people in the building opposite. The survivors gave light signals, inviting everyone to unite into one team. Sona asked anxiously how safe it was to trust these complete strangers. Soon, both agreed that allying with outsiders carried great risks. Sona admitted that she followed Jinsen in order to find someone truly reliable. The girl firmly stated that she did not want to take a stranger into the team. They soon decided not to join forces with the survivors from that building. Sona thanked the guy and assumed that Chief Choi was also alive. Jinsen instantly froze in shock upon hearing his boss's terrifying name. Sona reported on Chief Choi's escape from the 6th floor of the building. She then admitted that she became scared and ignored his cries for help. After this, the guy asked about the exact time of that terrible incident. The girl assumed that the boss was on the 3rd or 5th floors. The guy was seriously afraid that the survivors from the building opposite would start hunting. He then resolutely cast aside the disturbing thoughts about uncontrollable external factors. Soon the opportunity arose to spend the coin on a much-needed winter item. The hero became very cold and began to dream of a warm fur hat. However, he decided to buy boots so that Sona would not become a burden. Then Jinsen confidently selected shoes from the game store menu that appeared. The hero was tormented by the cold, considering himself selfish because of his dark thoughts. Soon, they fell asleep, deciding to put off all important matters for later. In the morning, the guy immediately asked his partner about the remaining battery on their phone. Sona noticed his awakening and complained about the unbearable cold. Jinsen then checked the charging status of all the valuable batteries found yesterday. The critical 22% was treacherously glowing on the mobile device screen. Suddenly, the girl started talking about the deputy, changing the topic of their short conversation. After this, Sona asked about the presence of solar panels on the roof. Jinsen was extremely surprised by the valuable information that he had not even suspected. The girl nodded, remembering her past experience working in a small business. Sona remembered those defective batteries installed on the roof itself. Jinsen immediately clarified the details of the breakdown, fearing that he would be left without communication altogether. The girl confidently confirmed that she supervised the project herself and would launch it. The guy resolutely called his partner upstairs to personally look at the panels. After this, the heroes had difficulty opening the door, which was blocked by very heavy snow. Soon the heroes came outside, amazed by the huge amount of fresh night snow. Then they looked up, hoping to see those treasured batteries as soon as possible. Soon, Jinsen discovered a technical ladder leading directly to the cold roof. The guy then grabbed the metal, trying to quickly lower the entire structure. However, the ladder was jammed, so the hero had to carefully climb up himself. Jinsen only groaned heavily in response to the question about the rise. Sona decided to take a risk and asked her partner to securely ensure her jump. The guy grabbed the girl's leg tightly and began to count down. On the count of 3, he threw Sona high into the air with force. The girl clung to the snowy edge and joyfully shouted about success. She climbed up easily, mentally thanking her old sports training. Sona landed on the roof and immediately began looking for the thing she needed. Her hand touched the cold surface of the solar panel she found on the roof. Sona smiled triumphantly, confirming to her partner that she had a valuable find in front of her. She promised to dismantle the panel and bring it down to Jinsen personally. Sona announced the descent of the first panel, and Jinsen confirmed receipt. Sona handed over the second panel, to which the guy briefly responded in the affirmative. Then Jinsen accepted the last detail, letting out a heavy sigh of tension. Now 4 solar panels lay on the floor, waiting to be used. After hard work, Sona wiped away her sweat, exhaling from extreme fatigue. The girl asked if this was enough, and heard confirmation that the work was completed. The heroes discussed the interfering snowfall and cloud cover, doubting the effectiveness of the panels. He remembered the previous speed of charging his smartphone under direct sunlight. 1% flashed on the smartphone screen, forcing the partners to wait agonizingly. The next day arrived, and the anxious survivors checked the status of their gadget. The smartphone showed only 9% charge after a whole night of waiting. Sona noted with disappointment that her energy level would not last long. Jinsun sat on the floor, remembering yesterday's titanic efforts to exercise. Then the guy added that the sun had completely stopped showing through the clouds. Despite the failure, Jinsun suddenly declared a sudden surge of hope. Sona asked for details, and he proposed a plan to save the office. The hero told about the company's warehouse, full of food and useful tools. The girl supported the idea, but had doubts about navigation without a working smartphone. Sona came closer and confidently promised that there would be no problems ahead. Then Jinsun turned around abruptly, extremely surprised by such sudden confidence. Sona reported that the company's warehouse is located very close to home. She often saw the building during her walks, so she knew the way. Jinsun felt relieved and re-energized after meeting Sona. The guy appreciated the resilience of his partner, who never asked for boots. Suddenly, Jinsun turned to Sonia, deciding to clarify one important point. The hero unexpectedly asked the girl about her foot size, which greatly surprised her. He remembered the boots and promised to give them to Sonia personally. The girl was delighted and cheerfully replied that she wore size 36. Sona suggested going together, but Jinsong gently cut off her enthusiasm. And then the guy told Sonia to wait and resolutely left alone. The girl tried on the new boots and admired how well they fit. A notification window about the creation of a battle group suddenly popped up in front of Jinsun. The guy was very surprised by the appearance of the group and the possibility of automatically receiving coins. The hero realized that increasing the number of participants would bring him greater benefits. Sona thanked him happily while Jinsong pondered the reasons behind the system. He then thought about new features and expanding his squad. While carefully studying the interface, the guy barely heard the voice of his devoted partner. Finally, Jinsun came to his senses and confirmed his well-being to the worried girl. Citing hunger, he offered a snack and secretly checked the windows. Soon the heroes went deeper into the office, deciding to first regain their strength a little. The hero suffered from terrible thirst on the third day without water. Then Jinsun suggested that Sonia go outside and melt some snow. Sona promised to bring old papers to quickly light a hot fire. The guy decided to start a fire on the roof, starting to prepare a safe place. He was aware of the danger of attracting looters with the thick smoke from burning paper. Brutal bandits often formed groups to commit robberies and murders. Soon, Jinsun struck a lighter, unable to bear the cold any longer. And then the flames flared up, giving the survivors long-awaited warmth on a dark night. The heroes stretched out their frozen hands to the fire, feeling the pleasant heat of the bonfire. Sona smiled and admitted that she was finally starting to come to her senses. The guy confirmed her words and began to melt the snow in a frying pan. The water quickly boiled, emitting thick steam over the bright tongues of flame. The survivors began to greedily drink the hot water, enjoying every sip of moisture. Jinsun fondly recalled the taste of warmth that warmed his exhausted body. The girl confirmed the pleasant sensations, feeling her vitality returning. Sona could hardly hold back her tears, forgetting about the existence of such simple joys. Jinsun praised their overall resilience and belief in a successful outcome. The heroes decided to fight to the very end, despite all the difficulties. The morning of the 15th day of survival arrived, bringing with it new challenges. Sona began to wake up Jinsun, persistently shaking his shoulder with her hand. The guy woke up abruptly, not understanding the reason for such an early, alarming awakening. Sona ordered him to stand up immediately, and pointed her hand insistently into the distance. The girl pointed anxiously at the neighboring building, noticing strange movement there. She reported receiving a signal that suddenly came from the street. Jinsun asked about the content of the message and heard about the group quickly approaching. Sona was silent for a moment, trying to get a better look at these unknown people. The stranger held a large poster inviting them to come with him. The guy jumped up quickly, clarifying the exact time of delivery of this strange note. Sona replied that people noticed their fire and were coming outside. The heroes began to doubt whether the people they met were well-wishers or simply treacherous marauders. Soon, Sona screamed in fear, pointing at the rapidly approaching people. 3 men in winter clothes walked decisively into the office building. Jinsun noted with shock that the strangers arrived much faster than expected. The guy told his partner to pack her things first before meeting the guests. One of the strangers smashed the head of an oncoming zombie with a powerful blow of a sledgehammer. Jinsun noticed that this group was moving much faster than he had calculated. He appreciated their teamwork in battle against a crowd of bloodthirsty monsters. The brunette estimated that it would only take the enemies 10 minutes to clear out the situation. He then put on his backpack, asking Sona if she was ready to go out. Sona confirmed her readiness by picking up the heavy bag and the homemade spear. Outside, terrible creatures prowled everywhere, blocking the path to long-awaited salvation. Then a crowd of the dead filled the road, plunging the entire city into nightmare. The strangers fought furiously through the zombies, using a heavy sledgehammer and a shield. Then they rushed forward, urging their partners to run much faster. The big man with the sledgehammer swung, preparing to deliver one powerful fatal blow. And then he brought the weapon down with a roar, crushing the dead man's head. Another fighter covered himself with a shield, brazenly breaking through the dense crowd of enemies. Jinsun watched the battle with anxiety, mentally preparing himself for the clash. The brunette then asked Sona if she was ready, urging her to finish quickly. Sona looked at the panels and decided to abandon them for life. Sona was hesitant about the batteries, but Jinsun insisted on prioritizing life. The girl looked seriously towards the dark corridor, and then Sona resolutely picked up her spear and heavy backpack. Suddenly, a deafening bang of a heavy front door was heard from the direction of the stairs. The heroes prepared for battle, noticing the monsters quickly climbing the stairs. They were faced with a choice between an open roof and a dark floor. Jinsun suggested going down, considering the snow-covered roof a dangerous ice trap. On the 6th floor, the survivors decided to immediately barricade the only available entrance. The heavy footsteps of unknown people echoed throughout the entire stairwell. Then Jinsun told his partner to prepare for the brutal battle that was about to begin. 3 strangers in winter clothes quickly climbed the stairwell. Jinsun felt a sudden sense of alarm as he noticed strange changes in the system's behavior. And then the footsteps began to sound much closer than just recently. Sona looked at her partner with alarm, wondering about the intentions of these people. It turned out that the strangers were carefully checking the office for other survivors. The pursuers had already reached the 4th floor, continuing their very fast journey. Soon they passed the 5th floor, approaching the heroes' barricaded position. Jinsun and Sona gripped their weapons tighter, expecting the enemy to appear soon. However, silence fell, and the survivors looked at each other in bewilderment at the sudden pause. The guy sincerely did not understand why the armed men suddenly stopped getting up. Sona whispered anxiously to Jinsun that something strange was starting to happen around them. Suddenly, a roar was heard from above, causing the heroes to shudder with great fear. Sona asked about Jinsung's well-being while looking at the thick clouds of smoke. Then Jinsun suggested that the noise that had occurred earlier was a powerful explosion. The guy was sincerely perplexed as to why the enemies used explosives against 2 people. Sona sadly admitted that she still felt a heavy sense of guilt. Jinsun encouraged his companion, noting her pride in refusing to hide forever. Suddenly he froze, realizing some important and frightening detail. After this, the guy suggested that Sonya immediately go down to the lower floor. Jinsun resolutely opened the door, hoping to confirm his sudden suspicions. The heroes carefully entered the dark corridor, illuminating the way with dim lanterns. Concrete debris and sharp shards of broken office glass were scattered everywhere. Jinsun reminded Sonya to be vigilant, and the girl nodded silently to him. Sona suddenly froze, hearing a suspicious crunching sound under her heavy boots. In a trembling voice, she pointed out to her partner something very frightening ahead. The boy's eyes widened in horror at the sight that unfolded before him. Right in front of them lay lifeless bodies, covered in thick scarlet blood. Jinsun told his companion to stay put and slowly walked forward. He noted to himself the lack of explosives and the strange number of corpses. The hero's gaze froze on the door, which was literally blown away by a powerful wave. Jinsun stepped forward wearily, cursing his suddenly lousy life. The guy gloomily wondered why these bastards were so eager for his death. Bloodied Chief Choi admitted that he himself had caused the powerful explosion. The wounded man gleefully declared that he could not have acted differently then. Suddenly, Chief Choi noticed Jinsun and froze in great surprise. The madman's face broke into a smile at the sight of his former deputy. He screamed the boy's name at the top of his lungs, greedily reaching out his hand to him. Jinsun looked at the tormentor with deep disgust and undisguised horror. The wounded man began to beg for salvation, complaining about his broken legs. The man tearfully begged for his life to be spared, and not left to die. The madman lamented piteously about the injustice, not wanting to die alone. Jinsun silently watched the enemy's agony, showing no sympathy. Sona heard a familiar voice and asked if the boss had really survived. Hearing a woman's voice, the wounded old man turned sharply towards the heroes. The man recognized Sona and began feverishly reminding her of his name. Sona dryly apologized to him, explaining her lack of medicine and skills. Chief Choi screamed frantically that more than anything he just wanted to live. He suddenly announced a crazy way to survive, surprising the girl present. The old man offered to become a monster, hoping to gain immortality through infection with the virus. He begged to be brought down so that he could voluntarily submit to the bite. Jinsun coldly replied to his boss that his crazy plan was completely impossible to implement. The distraught old man screamed furiously, blaming the survivors for his bitter failure. He angrily accused his partners of conspiring to get rid of him as quickly as possible. The delirious man suggested that the heroes all die together in the corridor. The wounded Choi cursed helplessly as life began to rapidly leave him. Sona confirmed her suspicions that these people were ordinary marauders. She noted the empty backpack and broken shield, not hiding her disappointment. Sona focused on checking the remaining equipment, ignoring the growing noise around them. Jinsen silently turned away from the corpse, trying to suppress his rage. The heroes hurried to leave before the smell of blood attracted more monsters. Jinsen said coldly that the boss would have died soon anyway. He then explained that death only relieved the old man from his suffering. The guy gently asked his companion not to blame herself for what happened anymore. Jinsen warned that the boss, who had turned into a monster, would have to be finished off immediately. Sona froze in shock, her eyes widening at the sharp sound. The girl seriously confirmed the correctness of his cruel but very true words. Sona anxiously pointed out to her partner the strange movement outside the huge window. Jinsen looked out in bewilderment, trying to see what was happening in the courtyard below. A huge crowd of enraged monsters filled the entire space under their building. The heroes studied the messages, where no one mentioned a fire. Jinsen warned Sonu about looters and zombies converging on the building. He watched for a long time and realized that the exit was completely filled with monsters. The hero was determined to leave this dangerous refuge as soon as possible. The boy then gripped the flashlight tightly to scout out the dark first floor. The couple began to carefully descend the stairs, peering into the frightening darkness. Sona suddenly froze, sensing someone's invisible presence in the cold corridor. She turned around and quietly asked her partner about the strange, frightening sound. Suddenly, a loud bang came from above, causing Jinsen to instantly tense up. The heroes stood frozen in tense anticipation, trying to comprehend the scale of the new threat. Soon, Jinsen saw a bloody monster through the crack, letting out a terrible roar. Sona covered her mouth in horror, seeing something frightening in front of her. The girl, shocked, assumed that their dead boss was standing in front of them. Jinsen confidently objected, reminding him of the fatal wound in the boss's head. The guy assumed that some marauder had recently been bitten by a zombie down below. The survivor from the 3rd floor probably climbed up to the 5th floor using the stairs. Or the monster got into the building through a broken window on the 5th floor. The partners decided to stick with the first option, suppressing the growing feeling of intense anxiety. Jinsen suggested that Sonya immediately go back down to the 1st floor. The guy was horrified by the scale of the chaos, because the monsters had completely taken over this floor. He remembered the security room and the fate of the missing Choi Jae-sung. Choi Jae-sung in the security room should have noticed the danger earlier. Jinsen warned Sonu that leaving through the door would be sheer suicide. The partners decided to test the route through a dark and dangerous underground parking lot. The guy suggested finding out the exact number of zombies on the lower level of the building. Below, a few monsters roamed, moving slowly between abandoned personal vehicles. Sona noticed about 10 creatures, comparing the place to a lobby. Jinsen noted many excellent shelters among the cars covered in cold snow. He added about the lack of wind, which prevents predators from smelling the scent in time. The guy pointed to an important reflection in the convex mirror on the wall. Sona struggled to make out the details of the first level of the basement. The couple struggled to see the details through the awkward angle of the mirror. Jinsen suggested going higher, deciding that there was enough information about the enemies. The hero dreamed of a car while studying the evacuation plan in a quiet office. The cold could kill the battery of an abandoned car surrounded by a crowd of hungry monsters. Jinsen refused transport and decided to make his way to the exit on foot. Sona concentrated on marking the new route in her crumpled survival notebook. The temperature outside dropped to deathly low levels, freezing everything. There were 5 hours left before the start of the risky foray into the frosty hell. Covered with blankets, the partners warmed themselves back to back in the silence of the night. Jinsen asked the girl shyly if his strong excitement was noticeable. Sona noticed that Jinsen was not sleeping at all and was constantly tossing and turning. The guy just silently looked away, immersed in his heavy thoughts. The girl assumed that the strange survivor below was to blame. Then Jinsen confirmed his guess and allowed Sonya to take the stranger. But he later added that such a decision would put the girl in danger. Sona called him reliable, warning him about the dangers on the cold street. She asked permission to call that man, and the hero immediately agreed. Then the guy suddenly stood up, finally deciding to break this prolonged silence. Jinsen warned his companion that he would turn on the phone briefly in the dark office. Sona smiled sweetly and willingly allowed him to use the bright screen. It was the 17th day of survival, and the clock was almost 6 in the morning. Jinsen was upset by the lack of new comments on his mobile phone. The heroes armed themselves and began to carefully descend to the dark first floor. The friends approached the emergency exit, but there was no one there. Sona suggested waiting longer, since only 3 minutes had passed. The time appeared on the smartphone screen, and the wait stretched out to 5 minutes. In the end, the mysterious stranger never arrived on time. Suddenly, a zombie that hadn't been there before appeared in front of them. Jinsen decided to deal with the monster by following their very first plan. Sona recalled information from the community about the unchanging roots of the Walking Dead. Jinsen whispered that some of the zombies were simply frozen and motionless. The guy froze behind the car, carefully watching the lone standing zombie. Sona nodded silently to her partner, ready to immediately enter this fight. Then the hero began to slowly creep up on the frozen dead man in the parking lot. The zombie slowly walked forward, not noticing Jinsen, who had come very close. The bloody monster let out a disgusting squeal, suddenly turning towards a quiet rustle. After which the dead man rushed forward furiously, but Jinsen had already prepared his weapon. A powerful blow from the mop crushed the head of the ice monster that was attacking them. Sona finished off the enemy, and the system immediately awarded the group 1 coin. The leader gave a thumbs up, delighted at receiving his first award. Sona smiled contentedly, clutching her trusty homemade spear tightly in her hand. The partners then moved cautiously further through the abandoned and gloomy parking lot. Jinsen stepped forward first, feeling the sharp breath of the icy winter wind. Finally, the heroes got outside, where they were met by a terrible piercing cold. The guy warned that in the cold they could simply freeze to death. Sona confidently stated that the dead do not know how to use stairs at all. Ahead, through the thick blanket of snow, the silhouette of another zombie appeared. The girl noticed that because of the snow they were moving much slower than usual. The survivors saw the Cheonggyecheon River completely frozen and covered in snow. Jinsen pointed to the bridge, which was 30 meters away, for Sonya. The partners quickly closed the distance, intently counting every meter they covered. The guy carefully monitored the situation, urging his companion not to slow down. Suddenly a strong snowstorm began, which immediately limited the visibility of the frightened heroes. Jinsen was afraid that the gusty wind would carry away their sense of living people. Near the police station, the monsters began to actively sniff the cold air. One of the bloodthirsty monsters turned around sharply, sensing the presence of uninvited guests. A whole crowd of hungry dead people rushed furiously towards the frozen characters. Sona screamed in horror, not understanding their further plan for salvation. Jinsen decided to immediately go down to the river, hoping to escape pursuit. Jinsen realized with horror that a crowd of hungry dead people was about to attack him. The roar of falling bodies inevitably attracted the attention of other hungry predators in the area. Jinsen frantically searched for the entrance to the building, hoping to find shelter as soon as possible. But all available entrances to the office center have long been occupied by zombies. The loud noise of the doors being broken down instantly revealed their secret location to the dead. Sona demanded that a new plan be immediately devised for their common salvation. The girl screamed sharply, pointing her partner in a new direction for a quick retreat. She noticed an abandoned green bus just on the left side of the street. Jinsen had great doubts about success as they tried to open the doors. Sona wanted to break the glass, but the guy asked her to wait a little. Jinsen saw the key in the ignition of this abandoned green bus. The guy pulled the jammed door of the transport towards himself with all his might. The hero leaned on it with all his weight, trying to quickly unblock the entrance to the bus. Finally, Jinsen opened the passage and quickly ran into the salon first. Bloodthirsty zombies rushed furiously towards the bus, smelling the scent of living flesh. The guy grabbed the handrail tightly, trying to quickly close the door from the inside. The hero frantically held the doors while the monsters were breaking into the cramped cabin. A crowd of hungry dead people formed a tight ring around the green transport they had blocked. Jinsen quickly jumped into the driver's seat and cursed loudly out loud. The guy turned the key sharply, fearing the fragile structure of the old bus would be destroyed. Sona screamed that they needed to close those heavy doors quickly. She furiously hurried the guy, urging him to act as quickly as possible. The bus's wheels began to slide madly through the deep snow, preventing it from moving. Jinsen cursed in frustration as he realized they were trapped. Sona warned in horror that the bloodthirsty creatures were already very close. The bloody monster beat furiously against the glass, begging to be let inside. The boy angrily ordered the monster to get away, pushing it away from the entrance. The hero delivered a powerful blow, sending the persistent creature straight to hell. Both survivors desperately hoped for salvation at that fateful moment. Jinsen pressed the pedal, and Sona fell from the sudden jerk of the vehicle. Jinsen asked excitedly how she was feeling, and Sona finally nodded briefly. The guy told them to hold on tight, because a dangerous road lay ahead. And then the bus began to crawl forward heavily, its wheels crushing the loose snow. Jinsen gripped the lever, desperately trying to stop this uncontrollable skid. The car hit the obstacle with a roar, sending up a shower of sparks in the darkness. Sona peered into the thick snowstorm, hoping to spot some kind of escape route. She closed her eyes as the heavy transport finally slowed down completely. The girl breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that they were still alive. The heroes froze, rejoicing at the closed door that separated them from death. But outside the window, creatures were already scratching, eager to get to the flesh. The monsters furiously beat against the glass, forcing the heroes to frantically search for a way out. Jinsen suggested distracting the bloodthirsty crowd in order to quickly escape from the trap. The rotten creatures pressed harder, threatening to immediately overturn the heavy bus. Looking at the claws of the monsters, the heroes did not want to believe in the end. Jinsen stated firmly that they had come too long a way together. The sudden crash of a broken display case caused the predators to instantly change their target. An enraged crowd of zombies rushed towards the noise, forgetting about the blocked people. The predators quickly ran away, giving the heroes a long-awaited chance for a break. Sona fell heavily to the floor when the bus finally stopped rocking. Jinsen confirmed the rescue, realizing the mortal danger of this terrible moment in history. Jinsen chuckled thoughtfully, peering intently into the reflection of the cloudy bus window. Sona then suggested that the remaining monsters would soon fall down on their own. The girl noticed that a strange noise was heard somewhere in a nearby building. She confidently pointed to the approximate floor where the source could be located. The friends were puzzled as to who exactly could have made that sound. Sona spoke hopefully about a surviving person with some remnants of humanity. Suddenly she screamed joyfully and pointed her finger somewhere very high. There really was a man standing there, actively waving his hand at the heroes. And then they saw a woman with binoculars in the window itself. Jinsen turned around in confusion, not believing his own tired eyes. Sona watched the surviving man's strange actions closely through binoculars. Through the lenses, Sona saw a sincere word thank you on the phone screen. Sona noticed the like and was delighted to see the boy's remaining humanity. The girl sadly admitted that she was ready to share food with the looters. The guy surprised his partner with a story about his meager diet before the meeting. Then Sona burst into loud laughter after an unexpected joke about an old frying pan. Later, Sona seriously asked about the availability of noodles in the warehouse. After a short conversation, the guys decided to go get some hot ramen together. Jinsen looked away tiredly, wrapping his cloak tighter around himself. Soon, both heroes were shivering violently from the cold inside the frozen bus. Jinsen sympathetically inquired about Sona's well-being, noticing her strong, painful trembling. The boy suddenly sneezed loudly, realizing the destructive power of the piercing, icy cold. The thin glass of the bus did not protect the survivors from the bitter cold. Sona confirmed through clenched teeth that the terrible cold had made her wake up. Jinsen grabbed Sonu's hands and was horrified by their icy state. The girl's lips turned blue, and her body continued to tremble slightly in the morning. The guy suggested that they warm up immediately, otherwise the cold would soon completely paralyze them. Jinsen was immersed in heavy thoughts, feverishly thinking up a plan for further rescue. An office worker was determined to start a fire right inside the frozen bus. Sona was scared by the smoke, but her partner decided to make a hole for ventilation. He warned that the loud cracking of glass would attract hungry mutants inside. Then the heroes simultaneously looked up at the metal ceiling of the frozen bus. The improvised spear pierced the hull with force, creating a narrow gap at the top. Sona announced her success with satisfaction, clutching her trusty weapon tightly. Jinsen reminded that for normal ventilation, several more holes need to be broken through. Soon the survivors lit a saving fire, using the pile of paper they had grabbed earlier. Jinsen silently warmed his frozen palms over the bright dancing flames. Sona suddenly showed her smartphone screen, discovering strange new activity there. The guy concentrated on checking the incoming data for the safety of their shelter. An unknown user asked which building the heroes are currently in. Sona promised to check the car model after seeing a new message from an anonymous person. The girl looked out the snow-covered window and immediately recognized that Sonata. An anonymous person asked permission to join in, confirming the exact make of the car parked below. Jinsen showed the smartphone screen to his partner, thinking about their next plan. An unknown survivor opened the window, wanting to find out the frightening details of what was happening outside. A dead man hung on the wall of the building, frightening the witness with his sudden appearance. The man threw a heavy dumbbell straight at the mutant's head, knocking him over. The eyewitness was horrified by the monster's ability to climb, as if they were professional masters. The deceased turned out to be the manager of a climbing wall, who retained his professional skills after his death. The chat discussed the theory about zombies retaining their talents while alive. Jinsen and Sona began actively preparing for the cold weather. The girl asked her partner's opinion about the frightening posts on this forum. Jinsen admitted that he fully expected this dangerous virus to develop in this way. He explained that the mutants had entered through a window broken by the explosion. Bloodthirsty creatures slowly wandered along the snowy street in search of flesh. Sona confidently stated that their new allies would soon leave the building. A woman in a warm winter jacket suddenly appeared in the doorway. Sona happily pointed at the stranger, recognizing her as the expected survivor. The girl in the jacket waved her hand in a friendly manner, greeting Jinsong and Sunwoo. Sona expressed hope that they would also be able to find warm clothes. Suddenly, a mutant jumped out of the snow and grabbed the woman. The stranger fell into the snow, and the monster began to tear at her body. Jinsen and Sona froze in horror as they watched the bloody massacre. The heroes saw how the predator cold-bloodedly finished off its defenseless new victim. Jinsen covered his mouth, realizing that the monsters would soon come running towards the smell. The guy warned his partner that it was extremely dangerous to stay in this place. He added that otherwise a sad end would inevitably await them both. Jinsen turned around abruptly and told Sonya to get out of here immediately. The partners quickly walked deeper into the street, trying not to look at the corpse. Jinsen turned around one last time, remembering the cruel lesson of this world. Jinsen grabbed Sonu's hand, reminding him to move quickly. And then the girl froze, unable to immediately comprehend what she saw. Then the hero insisted on moving, because this was the only way to survive. The guy squeezed his partner's shoulder tighter, trying to bring back her thirst for life. After this, Sona resolutely looked straight into the eyes of her companion. Soon armed heroes stood in the middle of the city, ready for any danger. They moved forward, hoping to find safe shelter in the chaos. Sona doubted the correctness of their path, looking around the empty, cold streets. Jinsen recalled a frightening scene in the subway where everyone had turned into zombies. Then another gust of snowstorm hit them in the face, but they went on. Jinsen and Sona turned on their flashlights as they walked deeper into the dark subway tunnel. The guy noticed that there were only corpses lying around, but no infected. On the stairs lay the body of a man who had clearly been trampled by the maddened crowd. Jinsen assumed that the remaining zombies had gathered somewhere deep within the station. Sona looked questioningly at her partner, waiting for his decision on the situation. The girl suddenly shone a flashlight on the entrance to an abandoned and dark mini-market. Jinsen's face lit up with joy at the sight of the remaining store sign. Inside, all the shelves were empty, and the goods had long since been looted. The girl suggested looking into the warehouse to at least look for water. In a dark corner, the heroes found several intact cans of the drink. Jinsen was delighted to find the beer, thinking that someone had left it there on purpose. Sona nodded and suggested that they take just a couple of cans for themselves. The girl then became upset about the completely looted winter clothing stores in the area. The guy agreed, noting that it was summer now and there was no warm clothing. Sona was surprised why the looters didn't touch the nearby phone store at all. The partners soon realized that they would have to cover a much greater distance. And then she showed something strange she noticed on the wall. The girl managed to take a photo of a frightening message left by an unknown person in this place. Jinsen felt a terrible sense of alarm when his partner's phone suddenly ran out of battery. And then the heroes moved on, disappearing into the endless black void. Sona noted the frightening emptiness of the tunnel, where there were not even any animals. Jinsen guessed that the zombies had gathered together since there were no corpses here. The girl admitted that the mere thought of meeting them frightened her. Sona focused her flashlight forward, peering into the thick night darkness. Soon the survivors came across an abandoned train car in a dark, dead-end street. The guy confirmed the absence of enemies and even dead bodies inside the carriage. Then Sona noticed a small box and opened it curiously. Jinsen moved closer to examine the contents of the wooden box they had found. Inside lay a sharp filler knife, gleaming in the cold light of their flashlights. Jinsen appreciated the sharpness of the blade and mentioned his important discovery. Jinsen showed Sonya a Bluetooth speaker that could distract mutants with a loud, sharp sound. Sona confirmed the lack of supplies and suggested leaving the carriage as quickly as possible. The partners then climbed out, continuing their dangerous journey in the darkness. Ahead, a frightening shadow of a monster appeared, lurking in the depths of a dark tunnel. The heroes froze, looking at the silhouette of this incredibly huge monster from behind. Soon, Jinsen and Sona realized in horror the scale of the new threat. The giant did not react to people at all, maintaining a frightening icy calm. In front of them stood a creepy zombie, whose body was covered in blood. Jinsen suddenly recognized the man, amazed by his 2-meter giant height. It turned out that this monster was once a famous professional baseball player. Jinsen suggested going around the giant to avoid a direct and deadly fight. Suddenly, a terrible wheeze came from the mutant's mouth, breaking the silence of the subway. Sona and Jinsen flinched, realizing that the enemy had sensed their presence. The mutant slowly turned his head, revealing the hideous scars on his face. The zombie's eyes flashed with fury as he finally spotted the survivors. Jinsen ordered Sonya to proceed with their old time-tested plan. The boy gripped his homemade spear tighter, preparing to meet the attack of a powerful opponent. The huge mutant took off and rushed towards the people. Jinsen met the monster's gaze, feeling the malice emanating from it. And then he struck sharply, plunging the tip into the chest. The guy brought down a heavy blow on the mutant's head. Then the tip of her homemade weapon sank into the monster's skull. The bloody blade sank deep into the flesh, tearing through the tissue of the zombie's neck. The girl screamed in horror when she saw that her trusty stick had broken. And then the giant bared his teeth, flashing his single red and mad eye. The mutant let out a furious wheeze and suddenly lunged towards the survivors. Jinsen felt a monstrous power, barely managing to cover the frightened Sona with his body. Soon the spear shaft burst in the boy's hands with a loud crack. Sona froze in front of the monster's gaping mouth, not even daring to breathe. And then the creature bared its rotten teeth, preparing to finish off its victim. Sona swung sharply at the zombie, and then she drove the steel hard into his head. The monster's huge body fell heavily onto the cold floor in front of the girl. Jinsen was amazed at the monstrous strength of the enemy, who ignored even a severe shoulder wound. The hero apologized for his weakness, realizing the complete inevitability of this cruel reprisal. Sona suggested attaching the sharp knife they found to the long shaft of a spear. The guy supported the idea, anticipating a significant increase in the penetrating power of their weapons. Soon the makeshift spear was ready, and the survivors quickly moved on. Jinsen suggested ending the short rest and quickly continuing the dangerous journey. They passed 5 empty carriages as they approached the station they needed. Suddenly, a deafening explosion was heard, causing the survivors to instantly freeze in place. Jinsen immediately realized the danger of the frightening noise in the dark tunnel. The guy firmly decided not to go forward because of a strange bad feeling. And then he shouted, calling on Sona to run back immediately. The exhausted heroes stopped, trying to catch their breath after their sudden rush. Jinsen gestured to his companion to be quiet, hearing suspicious sounds in the silence. The brunette peered tensely into the darkness, expecting the appearance of a new deadly threat. Soon he warned the girl that someone was rapidly approaching them. A crowd of furious infected monsters rushed at the heroes with wild cries. Sona offered to fight, but her partner decided to wait in the shadows for now. The enraged monsters were moving straight towards the train. Jinsen watched the retreating shadows carefully, clutching his spear tightly. The stream of monsters continued to rush towards the station, leaving the heroes behind. The boy gripped the weapon tighter, feeling adrenaline quickly filling his body. The terrifying predators ran past, driven only by their endless thirst for blood. The brunette watched the crowd, wondering about the reasons for their sudden flight. Sona breathed a sigh of relief, but her companion warned her of the continuing serious danger. The dark tunnel hid new, even more frightening secrets. The survivors painfully chose a path between the station with monsters and the unknown. Ahead of them lay either a meeting with the enemy or a dangerous reconnaissance mission. The girl timidly suggested hiding, clearly fearing another encounter with the monsters. Jinsen immediately objected, calling returning to the old path too dangerous an undertaking. Before, the creatures were too excited, but now they could easily smell it. The heroes froze in the darkness of the carriage, feverishly thinking over their new plan. Sona promised to unquestioningly accept any strong-willed decision of her faithful partner. The brunette peered tensely into the distance, trying to find at least one safe path. And then he ordered to quickly move back away from these monsters. The hungry monsters still roamed the station, waiting for their next victim. The boy gritted his teeth, desperately hoping to slip past the enemies a little longer. They needed to get up immediately to find the long-awaited exit as quickly as possible. Jinsen was surprised to notice that they had already entered the 3rd sector. Sona grabbed the heavy bag tightly, preparing to jump onto the platform. The guy deftly jumped over the fence, helping his companion rise much higher. He looked around anxiously, wondering where all those zombies had gone. Jinsen extended his hand to Sonya, urging her to follow him immediately. He began to pull the girl up, overcoming the resistance of this slippery surface. Suddenly their palms slipped and Sona fell straight into the darkness. The girl flew back with a scream, straight into the clutches of the hungry monsters. The creatures instantly reacted to the noise, turning to their new victim. Sona froze in horror as she saw the approaching shadows of these insane monsters. Sona froze in horror, realizing the frightening proximity of these hungry creatures. Then the girl fell quickly onto the cold rails right in front of the monsters. Jinsen shouted her name loudly, desperately trying to get his partner's attention. He ordered her to get up immediately, despite the intense growing pain. Sona quickly stood up while the zombies were already reaching out their hands to her. The monster's bloody hand clutched the hem of his clothes in a death grip. The girl shuddered in surprise, feeling a sharp jerk back into the darkness. Jinsen caught his companion in time when she screamed hysterically in fear. And then one infected quickly jumped forward towards its victim. The crowd of mad monsters continued to press furiously, leaving no chance for survival. Jinsen ordered them to run forward immediately, and Sona quickly agreed to help. And then they rushed up that steep staircase. Suddenly, the hero's path was blocked by another very ferocious infected monster. The boy delivered a powerful blow, repelling the furious attack of this mad monster. Sona gripped her makeshift spear resolutely, ready for another fight. Another enemy fell heavily down, clearing a passage for the frightened heroes. Jinsen looked back anxiously, checking the safety of his current dangerous path. The survivors continued their run, desperately fighting every monster they came across. The infected's loud scream echoed throughout the dark room. The weapon pierced the monster's head, ending its torment forever. Sona swung her bat furiously, protecting her partner from the monster's sudden attack. The creepy infected grinned madly, anticipating his easy prey. Then came a powerful blow, throwing the attacking creature far to the side. The girl deftly knocked the enemy down with a precise and swift movement. And then she kicked the zombie hard right in the chest. Sona raised her weapon high for the decisive fatal blow to the enemy. The exhausted heroes sank heavily to the floor, trying to catch their breath. Sona acknowledged the mortal danger, and Jinsen completely agreed with her. The guy asked about the situation outside, and his companion confirmed the absence of zombies. Jinsen let out a tired sigh, realizing that they had finally managed to survive successfully. Jinsen suddenly noticed something frightening on his partner's slender leg, and then he saw distinct blood stains on her boot. The guy immediately began to examine the wound, while Sonu was shaking violently nearby. The moment when the monster's hand barely touched the skin came to mind. The girl froze in silent horror, expecting the most tragic outcome of events. And then he carefully lifted her leg for a closer examination. Only a small, shallow scratch was visible on the pale skin. The hero breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that it was just a mark from a fingernail. Sona asked again about the nail incredulously, still in shock. The brunette gently reassured his friend, remembering his old scars from monsters. Sona asked with tears in her eyes if it was all true. Jinsen nodded confidently in response, confirming his previous words. The girl bit her lip, barely holding back the flood of bitter tears of disappointment that swept over her. Sona sobbed loudly with relief, because she considered this the end. After Jinsen treated her wounds, the heroine felt calmer. The first aid kit was missing many essential items to provide assistance. The guy put away the medications and encouraged Sona, telling her she was very lucky. Someone had already managed to take all the food, leaving the room completely empty. Jinsen suggested a quick inspection, and suggested that Sonya take a short rest here. The young man looked ahead seriously, considering their next dangerous step. Jinsen was relieved to find the long-awaited key in his hand. The brunette was delighted with his luck, and finally stopped worrying so much about finding a place to stay for the night. And then he began to carefully examine the scattered things and papers. Finally, amidst the complete chaos, the hero found an old, tattered work diary. Soon the guy approached the massive safe and prepared to open it. Sona asked if he knew the code, to which Jinsen responded with a short yes. The girl's eyes widened in intense surprise and sudden shock. After that, she jumped up and asked how he knew the secret. Jinsen just smiled mysteriously and began to talk about his past. It turned out that he used to work in the metro and knew the password rules. Sona asked about special things, but inside were ordinary keys. Jinsen countered that what was really important to them now was something else. He opened the wooden box and showed Sonya a shiny gas pistol. Brunette explained that weapons are always kept at metro stations. It was needed to protect the employees who collected all the cash in the morning. The guy handed the heavy box to his companion, offering her the valuable find. Sona refused in fear, admitting to a complete lack of any combat experience. Jinsen sighed understandingly, realizing the fragile girl's unpreparedness for such a step. Then the hero began to pack his backpack and quietly called Sona again. And then he showed her the key and told her about his find. Sona asked with great curiosity what exactly this key was for. Jinsen smiled slyly and suggested that they would see everything soon. The flashlight illuminated an old sign indicating the entrance to the duty officer's room. Sona suggested opening the lock quickly and checking the contents of the dark room. The guy decisively inserted the key and turned it in the heavy door. The boys looked at each other happily, hoping for a long-awaited rest in a quiet place. The heroes carefully entered inside and began to carefully examine the cramped space. Jinsen noticed that this little room was much more cramped than his previous one. Suddenly they discovered a pale man sitting silently in the corner. Jinsen and Sona froze in shock at the sight of the mysterious stranger. Sona came closer and carefully examined the pale man in the corner. The stranger sat motionless and did not react at all to the bright light. Sona bitterly noted that this unfortunate man had died long ago. He was not infected with the virus, but simply died of hunger. After seeing this, the guys decided to rest and finally get some sleep together. Jinsen offered to take a warm blanket with him on the dangerous journey. Sona replied that there was almost no food and the backpack had become light. The friends fell into a deep sleep, hoping for a safe morning in the shelter. Soon, Jinsen woke up and began to plan their further difficult route. The guy opened a system store and looked after winter clothes for Sona. Jinsen noticed the cold weather and realized that he would soon emerge to the surface. The brunette felt something was wrong underground and thought about the difficult path. The guy was confused about what clothes to buy for himself and Sonya. The hero couldn't decide on a purchase and decided to simply put it off. Suddenly, Jinsen saw a new update in the system and was very surprised. He clicked on the strange icon in the store with great curiosity. Jinsen started to wake up Sona, but she only sleepily asked for the time. Sona stretched lazily and began to quickly pack her travel backpack. The guy gave the command to move out, and the friends left their temporary night shelter. Ahead on the rails, the boys suddenly saw something strange and froze. The brunette examined the barrier and quickly noticed traces of someone's secret presence. And then Sona resolutely began to climb up the cold metal. The girl carefully looked outside and immediately froze from the nightmare she saw. Right in front of her, hundreds of creepy and bloodthirsty red monsters were swarming. Sona ducked down in horror and tried to become as invisible as possible below. She told Jinsen in a trembling voice about the countless hungry zombies. The guy listened to his friend with intensity and suggested that they immediately look for another way. However, the heroes quickly realized that all the other passages were also blocked. Sona asked in confusion about the plan of action in this stalemate. Jinsen gloomily stated the necessity of a dangerous exit onto the icy surface of the city. Jinsen decided to find a way to wash away the smell so that the monsters wouldn't smell it. And then the guy stood up and wanted to carefully examine the metro area. Sona silently followed her friend into the very depths of the dark corridor. Soon, the guy carefully studied the screen, trying to find a new useful item. The system offered a search engine that allowed one to find rare items hidden in the store. Jinsen activated the useful item, and a bright icon appeared in front of him. And then he entered a search query, hoping to find salvation today. The guy suddenly thought about the existence of one extremely important and scarce product. The brunette resolutely tried to find a vaccine against the deadly virus through the system. However, the search for an antidote yielded no results, greatly disappointing the tired hero. The guy unsuccessfully searched for antibodies, trying to save the girl. Jinsen sighed heavily and sat down, realizing the futility of his recent attempts. Then he entered a search query for a special odor neutralizer. The system provided the required deodorant, which lasted for exactly 1.5 hours on the road. The hero was outraged by the high price of the goods, thinking about the long journey to the warehouse. The brunette decided to buy 3 pieces, checking the number of gold coins remaining. He exhaled heavily, having spent the last of his savings on this important item. Sona was surprised by the find and asked where he got these bottles. The girl twisted the can doubtfully, not believing in its power. Jinsen suggested taking a risk and going back if the plan suddenly failed. Jinsen clarified his companion's readiness, and Sona resolutely confirmed her consent. The survivors left the shelter and went out into the blinding snow and cold. The guy warned about a possible encounter with zombies in a snowy city. A strong, icy wind hit them in the faces, making further progress difficult. Suddenly, Sona noticed a figure ahead and fearfully warned her partner. A bloodied woman in a green jacket slowly walked away through the snowdrifts. The heroes froze and watched warily at the strange behavior of the lone target. The monster's face looked terrifying due to deep wounds and blood. Jinsen and Sona prepared for battle, realizing the imminent threat ahead. The torn creature began to slowly turn towards the hiding young people. Jinsen, with a bloody spear, watched the lonely target walk away. Sona happily noted the high effectiveness of their deodorant. The guy nodded confidently and suggested continuing in that spirit. The heroes discussed dangerous marauders and gunslingers guarding valuable supplies of gunpowder. The girl pointed to the sign, realizing the serious threat of meeting armed men. Finally, the survivors reached the snow-covered Suyu station through a thick blizzard. Jinsen was alarmed to realize that the route was significantly behind schedule. The couple split up to look for a suitable place to spend the night in the city. Sona sadly examined the broken shop windows in search of surviving things. The protagonist came across a locked door and studied the obstacle with puzzlement. The hero noticed strange shadows inside the building and heard a frightening roar. Jinsen realized with alarm that it was impossible to enter this room safely. The tired survivors continued their arduous journey through deep, cold snowdrifts. The guy asked about the results of the search, but Sona only shook her head in disappointment. The girl acknowledged the difficulty of finding a zombie-proof shelter. Suddenly, Jinsen called out to his companion, having discovered a potentially suitable dark building. He suggested that Sonia go up the stairs and check the rooms. The young men entered cautiously and began their ascent in silence. Sona noted with relief the absence of bloodthirsty monsters in the dark corridor. Jinsen forbade breaking glass due to the risk of attracting the attention of dangerous enemies. Jinsen told Sonia to wait while he looked around the dark office space. The guy suggested that there was another way to get inside the closed, cold building. The hero carefully studied the rows of mailboxes on the wall of the gloomy corridor. He began to frantically rummage around with his hands in search of the treasured hidden hiding place. Suddenly, Jinsen came across the desired object and chuckled rather quietly. The survivor proudly showed his companion the keys he had found to the locked door of the cafeteria. Sona was completely delighted by her partner's incredible intelligence. The girl asked about the secret to his success, and the guy pointed out the operating mode. Jinsen explained the principle of storing spare keys and confidently opened the door. Inside, untouched supplies of flour and eggs were found in a dark room. Jinsen inquired about the fate of the flour, and Sona suggested leaving it for now. The load turned out to be too heavy, so the survivors decided to hide it securely. The partners agreed to return for groceries later and quickly left the room. The hero found a place to spend the night, a spare battery, and even a watch. Jinsen planned to reach the warehouse tomorrow, counting the last 4 remaining chocolate bars. Sona expressed fear of encountering armed men on the territory of the guarded warehouse. The girl suggested coming up with a secret password in case of sudden mortal danger. The chestnut-haired companion thought for a moment, choosing a suitable word for the code. Sona put forward her idea and looked questioningly at her serious partner. She decided to switch to informal address when she saw a gun or weapon. Jinsen agreed to address him formally when he saw his partner's bladed weapon. The girl suggested different code names for each dangerous crisis situation. Sona folded her palms and asked the guy to communicate much more simply in the future. The companion wanted to attract less attention from enemies with unnecessary official words and phrases. Jinsen smiled warmly and readily supported his partner's new idea. Lightning flashed menacingly outside the window, and the heroes decided to rest a little. Sona was very surprised by the rare natural phenomenon of thunder and snow. The guy warned about heavy snowfall, which would complicate their difficult journey. The tired girl instantly fell asleep on the table under the reliable supervision of her friend. Soon, Jinsen also fell into a restless sleep, sitting on a chair. Jinsen sat in silence and suddenly heard a very strange noise. A lone motorcyclist sped through the night snowstorm and deep snowdrifts. The hero was surprised by the ability of transport to travel at night through such heavy snow. The boy realized with alarm that the stranger was moving in their direction. Suspicious footsteps below made the survivors wary and quickly hold their breath. A huge crowd of hungry monsters suddenly filled the entire snowy street below. Sona noted with fear that the noise of the engine had attracted hundreds of dangerous monsters. Jinsen grabbed his head, trying to think of a plan to escape from the trap. Friends suggested that the biker was deliberately leading the bloodthirsty horde behind him. Sona reminded us of the lack of food and the long journey to the destination. Jinsen suddenly became wary, sensing a new threat approaching in the dead silence. Sona was delighted with the valuable find of a battery for their smartphone. The guy frantically scrolled through the community news while hail fell outside the window. The shocking information on the screen made the hero literally freeze for a moment. Netizens warned of a dangerous cult and madness in the shelters. The survivors began to doubt the existence of a safe place with a stable supply of resources. Jinsen remembered Hyukjae, who went to look for the truth on the coast. Sona suggested putting thoughts of the suspicious camp out of her head for now. There was no information in the chats about the mysterious biker on the road. The young man was determined to continue the fight in this hell. Jinsen decided to have one last chocolate snack before starting his long journey. The heroes then slowly made their way to the warehouse through a severe cold snowstorm. The guy warned about turning back if he encountered a zombie. He used his last can of camouflage and told his partner to run faster. Jinsen was glad there were few monsters on this wide, snowy street. Sona caught her breath and noted the proximity of their goal. Thick white fog greatly limited the hero's visibility on the abandoned road. The camouflage period had ended, so the survivors prepared for a fair fight. The girl suddenly pointed forward with her hand, noticing something very important in the distance. Finally, the partners reached the huge blue gates of the warehouse they needed. Jinsen was happy to realize that they no longer had to look for food. Sona grabbed the handles tightly and tried to open the heavy gate. However, the entrance turned out to be locked, which greatly surprised the suddenly confused girl. The hero felt alarm, realizing the strange changes in the security of this warehouse. Sona pointed to the wall where new barbed wire had suddenly appeared. Jinsen asked about the time of her last visit to this protected facility. The survivors then decided to walk along the wall in search of another entrance. The girl carefully examined the fence, trying to find at least one narrow loophole. Suddenly she noticed a weak spot in the defense and pointed it out confidently. Sona resolutely declared that she would now climb over the high wall herself. Jinsen grabbed Sonu's hand, warning him of the danger beyond the walls. The guy noted the suspicious silence around him, but he had no other choice. The hero peered tensely into the distance, preparing for any turn of events ahead. The girl reported the lack of food and the end of their camouflage. Jinsen sighed heavily and confirmed that he fully understood the seriousness of the situation. The man warned of survivors and a possible fight behind barbed wire. After a short nod, Sona quickly rushed forward towards the high fence. Jinsen helped his companion jump, putting his palms out for a sharp jerk. Having climbed up, the girl looked around and whispered that she didn't see anyone. She resolutely declared her intention to go down into this gloomy building. Sona jumped down deftly and landed softly on the snowy ground. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and quietly whispered that they had finally arrived. Suddenly, a cold pistol barrel was pressed to the back of her head, interrupting her thoughts. Sona froze in horror when she heard the sharp order to raise her hands immediately. The stranger roughly felt her clothes, checking for any hidden weapons. The man stated that he had no weapon and continued to hold the heroine at gunpoint. Sona turned around and asked with great surprise if it was hers. The stranger ordered her to immediately lead her partner to the main entrance. Threatening reprisals, he demanded that they act quickly and not do anything stupid. Sona screamed desperately, loudly warning Jinsen about the human's death trap. Jinsen heard Sona's scream and realized the presence of enemies behind the wall. The guy guessed from the address that the enemy was only one person. He began frantically searching his backpack for a means of answering. Jinsen's hand tightly gripped the handle of the firearm found in the bag. The hero nodded decisively to himself, fully accepting this dangerous plan. The stranger ordered Jinsen to drop his weapon and go to the main gate. The boy stepped forward with a spear and asked the enemy to remain calm. The killer pressed the barrel of the gun closer to the girl's head, demanding that she drop the stick. The homemade spear fell with a dull thud onto the cold, snow-covered ground. Jinsen slowly raised his free hand up, feigning complete defeat. The invader roughly drove Sona forward while the hero assessed the range of the shot. Jinsen understood the urgent need to get closer for an accurate gas salvo. The guy was afraid to leave his hiding place, afraid of prematurely discovering the hidden pistol. The hero convinced the enemy to let his girlfriend go, declaring that he was completely unarmed. The enemy in the black jacket cursed, continuing to nervously hold the hostage at gunpoint. The villain rudely ordered Sonya to move on, without taking the barrel off her head. The distance was closing, and Jinsen was already preparing to deliver his decisive blow. There came a turning point when the guy decided to begin the operation immediately. Jinsen loudly ordered Sonya to duck and instantly raised his weapon. The girl fell sharply down, and the stunned enemy found himself under fire. A sharp shot rang out very close, almost hitting the guy's head. The unknown enemy screamed in pain as something burned his face. The poisoner, wearing a black jacket, fired a pistol furiously into the air. Jinsen barely managed to duck as the bullet whistled past. The roar of gunfire filled the space as the hero tried to get out of the line. Someone shouted the girl's name loudly as she furiously attacked the shooter. The girl grabbed the enemy's wrist with a death grip, preventing him from aiming. With a decisive movement, she knocked the armed man onto the cold, snowy floor. Jinsen desperately pulled on his backpack, demanding that he immediately release his important item. Sona pinned the scoundrel to the ground, urging her partner to grab the prey faster. She took out a roll of duct tape to securely tie up this adversary. The guy quickly put on his white backpack, looking around fearfully at the suspicious noise. The hero armed himself with a pistol and seriously considered the possibility of having other accomplices. A crowd of hungry zombies came out at the sound of gunfire, surrounding the two survivors. Jinsen shouted loudly at the girl, demanding that she quickly take this important key. Sona promised to give up the key, ordering the enemy to immediately step aside. The girl fought fiercely with the enemy, trying to snatch the object by force. The huge shadows of the monsters loomed over the guy while his partner hesitated. Sona's face contorted in horror as she realized the scale of the threat. She kicked him sharply, ordering the bastard to hand over the key immediately. Sona exclaimed joyfully when she finally found the right key in her pocket. The girl quickly rushed to the massive gates, bound with heavy iron chains. She tried desperately to insert the key, loudly begging the lock to open quickly. Jinsen fought back furiously with his spear, wondering if his life would end here. The heroine cursed loudly, realizing that the key did not fit the lock at all. The guy delivered a crushing blow, sweepingly cutting off the head of the one advancing on him. Gasping for breath from extreme fatigue, the hero turned sharply at the noise behind him. Gritting his teeth until they gnashed, he prepared for the very last battle. The huge zombie made a powerful leap, aiming straight for the survivor's throat. Jinsen gripped the bloody shaft of his spear tighter, preparing to meet the enemy head-on. Jinsen gripped his homemade spear tightly, preparing for another attack. The bloody monster screamed in rage, baring its sharp and rotten teeth. The guy gripped the weapon's shaft more comfortably, feeling a strong tension in his hands. The hero delivered a powerful blow, fighting off the monster that was attacking him. The zombie's face flashed in the doorway as the creature tried to force its way inside. Blood sprinkled the clean snow under the feet of those fighting in a mortal battle. The terrifying creature let out a guttural roar, never taking its eyes off the survivor. Jinsen collapsed to the ground as the predator suddenly went on the offensive. The heavy lock finally gave way, and with a loud clang it broke in half. The guy turned to the gate, seeing how the monster was thrown back with force. Sona desperately screamed at the guy to run for cover quickly. Jinsen ran through the snow with all his might, looking back anxiously. The girl clung to the cold bars, holding back the onslaught of the mad, bloody monsters. The survivors froze in horror as bloody hands reached out to them. The trapped monsters howled furiously and thrashed in agony behind bars. Suddenly, the keys flashed in the air, becoming their last chance. Sona, with trembling hands, tried to turn the key in the old lock faster. She asked her partner about his well-being with concern, checking him for wounds. An exhausted Jinsen collapsed onto the icy ground as the mortal danger receded. Jinsen suggested going inside before the sounds of gunfire lured the monsters. The stranger huddled in the snow, complaining of an unbearable pain in his eyes. Jinsen resolutely suggested to his companion that they quickly bring the injured man into the building. Together they picked up the wounded man, trying to act as quickly as possible. The protagonist suddenly froze, struck by the unexpected recognition in the stranger's face. A crying man in glasses tearfully recognized him as the deputy. Sona remembered that she had already met this poor guy in the security room. The companion sternly reminded the man that he must not lose the towel now. The victim quietly muttered that his eyes still stung a lot. The man thought that he should not have started the fight first while the kettle was boiling. Jinsen sincerely thanked the girl for her understanding in this situation. The man silently looked at the kettle, which began to whistle very loudly. He politely offered the tired boys some hot, invigorating tea. Sona took a sip and felt the long-awaited warmth spreading inside her. The companion asked his new acquaintances when exactly they had arrived there. The stranger admitted that he came to the building for solar panels. The man said that he was installing them in the morning and then saw the guys. He explained that he moved the panels to the roof because of their low efficiency. The hero thought about how to hide valuable equipment under glass. Jinsen worriedly asked the man if there were enough supplies in this place. The man replied that there were plenty of materials, but the food situation was difficult. The technician said hesitantly that the food situation remained very uncertain. He explained that the main food supply depot was located at the second site. The man recalled how the roof collapsed under the weight of the thick snow that had fallen. The technician cheered his friends up with the news that the cold would keep the food from spoiling. Jin Sung apologized guiltily to Assistant Choi for their sudden appearance. Then the office worker cautiously asked if they could stay there. The shelter owner silently pondered the benefits of acquiring new, reliable allies. After some thought, the man nodded in agreement and allowed them to stay. The interlocutor suddenly admitted that he himself was going to ask them for help. He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, remembering all the terrible events of that day. The man admitted that he could no longer defend himself alone. He was afraid that other people would appear and could simply take everything away. The assistant thanked his new allies for trusting him. The bloodthirsty monsters continued to slowly wander around the building in the thick snow. Sona stood by the window and carefully watched the departing creatures. Jinsen seriously asked his assistant where he got the gun. A man took a gun from a dead police officer who had decided to commit suicide. It turns out he took a pistol for self-defense from an officer who committed suicide. The protagonist stood up and inquired about the remaining cartridges in the magazine. The man sadly replied that those were all his bullets. Sona noted that the zombies outside became an excellent defense against outsiders. The bespectacled man asked with surprise whether the boys had yet managed to eat. The hot noodles were boiling appetizingly in the pot, emitting an incredibly enticing aroma. The heroes looked at the food in fascination, unable to take their eyes off it. The kind survivor promised to cook more ramen if the first portion wasn't enough. Suddenly Sona jumped up, remembering one very important secret supply. Sona triumphantly took out a cold beer, deciding to have a real feast now. The boys instantly perked up, realizing that this evening would be truly warm. Jinsen finally picked up a serving of noodles with his chopsticks, preparing to taste the long-awaited food. From the first bite, the guy literally beamed, feeling the forgotten taste of life. Sona devoured the noodles contentedly, feeling the hot broth warm her soul. A cold glass filled to the brim suddenly appeared in the survivor's hand. The bespectacled man suggested that his friends drink some beer before it got completely warm. Jinsen happily supported this idea and clinked his glass loudly. The guys drank to their new friend, and to the incredibly delicious noodles. The heroes sat next to each other, admitting that they had not felt so full in a long time. Jinsen thought that it was not in vain that they had made their way through the icy blizzard. Finally, they were warm and no longer hungry. All worries disappeared, because now they had a place to rest. Jinsen shuddered, the warmth leaving his body too quickly. The group shivered, cursing the cold and useless heaters. He realized gloomily that without electricity, it would be twice as cold. The bespectacled man pulled out of his memory the forecast of -35. Then the guy suggested lighting the grill, desperately looking for a way out. Sona and Jinsen immediately became enthusiastic about the idea. But the search for firewood in the warehouse ended in complete failure. Then the friends realized that synthetic clothing is not suitable for a fire. Suddenly Sona remembered the real dense forest behind the office. Everyone froze, realizing the proximity of vital fuel. As they descended, the heroes discussed the supplies of household goods on the first floor. Jinsen was looking forward to the long-awaited opportunity to finally brush his teeth. The friends threw away their knives. They were useless against the monsters. They ignored the office supplies, considering them to be absolutely useless junk. The bespectacled man mentioned a garage and a storage area for warm clothes in the basement. He confirmed the availability of the items, suggesting that they be selected later. Jinsen was upset to notice the lack of any suitable shoes. The guy pulled on a bunch of socks, but their huge size only got in the way. Remembering his 42nd year, he began to look for an alternative. The hero opened a system store and decisively bought warm boots. Jinsen was amazed that things appeared where he needed them. He handed over the boots, telling his partner to try on the new boots quickly. The bespectacled man froze, not understanding where the shoes had suddenly appeared. Jinsen lied about the spare tire while his friend was delighted with the perfect fit. The bespectacled man thanked him, and the system immediately added the participant. He realized that gifts help quickly attract people to the group. Friends found the perfect barbecue grill for heating the room in a warehouse. Jinsen lifted the heavy stove and ordered them to leave immediately. The brunette remembered his friend's addiction and decided to buy his trust. Suddenly he froze abruptly, ordering his partner to wait 1 minute. Jinsen noticed that there was a missing important item in the warehouse. The bespectacled man stared at his friend in bewilderment, not understanding anything. The brunette looked out the window mysteriously, calculating his next move. The companion screamed, not believing his own eyes from shock. A pack of expensive imported cigarettes suddenly appeared in Jinsen's hand. The shocked guy admitted that he had not smoked since the disaster. He traded tobacco for ramen, deeply touching his old friend. The brunette smiled and asked if they would now become a team. The bespectacled man froze, sincerely touched by such unexpected concern. The friend hugged Jin Sung, who told him to call him Sunbae. Sona was busy with the dishes in their new kitchen. Then the boys returned with the stove, joyfully announcing their return. And then Jinsen proudly dumped out a pile of all the things he had found. When Sona saw the down jacket, she was immediately completely delighted. Next, the brunette took out all the necessary cleaning products. The happy girl immediately rushed to hug her faithful savior. And then she hurried to wash herself, washing away all the dirt. For 3 days, the heroes stubbornly set up their new camp. They laid out mattresses nearby, creating a very cozy area. They then installed solar panels to protect them from the wind. Later, Sona noticed that the dead began to slowly disperse. She soon saw that there were almost no zombies left outside. Then Jinsen realized that the situation in the building had finally stabilized. And then the brunette finally decided to check the situation outside. But first, he decided to get at least some kind of weapon for the group. Sona agreed, although she realized the difficulty of the path. Then Jinsen admitted that the cold and the lack of coins were frightening. Suddenly the silence was broken by the roar of a motorcycle, interrupting thoughts about the car. A bloodied biker suddenly appeared, shocking their entire group, and a huge crowd of hungry zombies rushed after him. The helmeted cyclist cursed, not expecting any more nasty surprises. She remembered how zombies suddenly overran her hometown of Banghak-dong, and then she ran desperately, trying to escape from pursuit. The fugitive then rushed up the stairs, looking for at least some kind of shelter. She rushed about feverishly, afraid of falling into the clawed paws of the monsters. Suddenly, a high-speed motorcycle rushed past her with a wild roar. At first, the girl decided that the biker was also saving his own skin, but he treacherously led a horde of zombies to tear people apart. The shocked heroine mentally dubbed these madmen real freaks. These bastards cold-bloodedly dragged a crowd of creatures to the survivors. Meanwhile, the guys finished setting up and divided up their areas of responsibility. Sona immediately began the tedious process of counting all the warehouse boxes. Soon she tensed, feeling someone else's presence behind her. Choi's assistant, the person in charge of data collection, approached her. He briefly reported on the results of the inspection of the generator he had repaired. But due to the cloudy sky, the device did not work. Then Choi volunteered to help Sonya with the inventory of provisions. Jinsen took on the patrol and planning of the sorties. He soon returned, asking if they were still there. Afterwards, he asked if this assistant had helped Sonya well. Jinsen discussed the gloomy sky and dead batteries with his friends. The brunette gloomily confirmed that he had expected exactly this outcome. And then he admitted that it had become much more dangerous outside. Soon Sona realized that all the energy in the shelter had dried up. The group immediately gathered to discuss a plan of action. Then Jinsen armed himself and prepared the old bike for the sortie. The friends gloomily saw off their leader into the icy unknown. He calmed the worried Sona by reminding her of the risk of losing her home. The guy then raised his spear, telling everyone not to worry at all. Promising to be careful, he left his friends to guard their headquarters. Jinsen swore that he would return with a powerful stove and a pistol. and then Sona carefully attached a strong rope to the bike. The brunette thanked everyone and finally rode out into the icy darkness. His friends shouted after him to return immediately if there was danger. Jinsen was glad that Sona had thought of every little detail. Soon he was rolling along snowy and dead streets. The brunette looked around the houses warily, fearing a sudden attack by the creatures. Noticing the school building, he realized that the house he needed was nearby. Suddenly something flashed ahead and he braked sharply. An icy wind lashed at his face, forcing him to pick up the pace. Jinsen froze, smelling the acrid smell of exhaust fumes in the air. Then he smelled what he thought was a car that had been wrecked in an accident. He wondered why this strange smell was coming from here. Suddenly there was a roar and a powerful motorcycle appeared in front of him. Jinsen turned around abruptly, wondering where that bike had come from. He cursed, realizing that there was clearly something wrong with this motorcycle. Then the hero shuddered, noticing something truly frightening ahead. Through the snowstorm in the distance, dark silhouettes of many strange people appeared. Jinsen slowed down, deciding to take a closer look at everything first. He stared ahead in shock, refusing to believe his eyes. Jinsen directed the light of the lantern and saw a huge crowd of dead people. He realized with horror that a horde stood before him. The motorcyclist deliberately led an army of bloodthirsty corpses behind him. The boy decided to run away, realizing the scale of this mortal threat. The wheels were slipping in the snow, preventing the car from gaining enough speed. Jinsen was breathing heavily, pushing on the pedals with all his might. He looked around in panic, checking the distance to his pursuers. An enraged crowd of monsters was rapidly approaching the lone victim. The hero noted with bitterness that the monsters had gotten too close. Then he frantically searched for a place to hide safely. Remembering the familiar place, Jinsen rushed towards the old school. He understood that the school building was his only chance. The hero abandoned the bike and began desperately tugging at the locked door. The main entrance was tightly locked, depriving the guy of all hope. The guy ran along the wall, trying to find another entrance. Then Jinsen leaned against the window, begging for it to open quickly. The hero cursed as another obstacle defied his efforts. He continued to hit the glass unsuccessfully, begging for salvation. Finally, the latch gave way and the window creaked open. First, Jinsen threw the heavy backpack inside the dark room. Then Jinsen jumped over the frame into the icy darkness of the school. The hero froze, noticing someone's terrible pale figure ahead. The enraged dead man grabbed his leg, not letting him go. The guy's gaze filled with rage at the sight of the vile corpse. He then delivered a powerful blow straight into the monster's face. The creature's head jerked back, splattering dark blood all around. The boy angrily ordered the creature to let him go, continuing to strike. But the dead man continued to hold the shoe, ignoring any damage. Jinsen tensed, trying to overcome the resistance of this mad predator. Again ordering him to let go, he grabbed the hammer. Jinsen kicked the dead man away and swung with all his might. The zombie fell back, no longer blocking the hero's path. The guy shuddered, noticing the silhouettes of the advancing horde behind the glass. Then he leaned against the frame, holding back the onslaught of the monsters. The creature's pale face pressed against the glass, causing horror. Then the bloody palm left a long, disgusting mark on the glass. Jinsen realized that the slightest delay would cost him his life. Then he fell to his knees from sheer exhaustion. Sona noticed her colleague's agitation and quietly asked about the reason. She replied that her older comrade would definitely cope with the danger. Sona nodded briefly to her colleague, trying to remain calm in the silence. The bespectacled man groaned thoughtfully, realizing the gravity of their dangerous situation. He then showed me his dead phone, suggesting I quickly check the news. Sona asked doubtfully if they really should take the risk now. He explained that the charge would only last for 10 minutes. She welcomed the light while her partner fished for the weak net. Jinsen clutched the lantern, reading that zombies react to blood. The chat was full of people who locked their friends who had come to them at home. An anonymous person reported that the dead, having smelled blood, suddenly went berserk today. He then looked around the classroom, making sure there were no enemies at all. An anonymous user asked if mutants had become more dangerous recently. Jinsen read about giants while the horde loomed outside the window. He wondered if the horde was being led by a biker or if it was a coincidence. Suddenly he flinched, noticing a frightening question in the chat. A photo of a creepy 2-meter-tall mutant appeared on the screen. Jinsen screamed, shining his flashlight into the empty space outside the window. Colleagues discussed the theory that the monster's skeletons began to change rapidly. The bespectacled man was frightened by the news that the biker was deliberately killing the survivors. Sona grabbed her partner sharply, demanding that he wait immediately. Then she realized that their leader had fallen into a trap. Sona tried to run away, but her partner grabbed her sharply. The girls screamed that they had to bring back their missing friend. She vividly remembered the horde that had recently blocked their path. Sona warned that there would be nothing from the person after such a meeting. The bespectacled man said gloomily that it was too late to save anyone. Sona froze abruptly, demanding that he quickly explain the meaning of his words. She stepped towards her partner, begging him to tell her everything quickly. The bespectacled man remembered that the post was published at exactly 4 in the morning. Sona realized with horror that the morning horde was already here. Her colleague squeezed her shoulder, urging them to stick together until the end. Then the guy firmly stated that this building must be preserved. He then added that it was not by chance that Jinsen left them here. The girl apologized, promising that she would also protect this place. Jinsen carefully made his way through the darkness of the abandoned dark building. Suddenly he heard a sound coming from right next door. The hero wondered whether a monster or a living person was hiding there. He decided to check the room, hoping to find an ally in the stranger. The guy held his breath, peering carefully into the dark crack of the door. Seeing the child's silhouette, the hero suddenly froze in great surprise. Jinsen realized with bitterness that this child had not been evacuated. Jinsen decided to keep the boy, since his house was nearby. He soon became suspicious when he looked at the light clothing of the child he met. He was amazed at how one could survive the cold in light clothes. The boy's face distorted, revealing him as a creepy, dead monster. Jinsen exhaled, realizing that a bloody fight was definitely unavoidable. The enraged monster rushed at the hero, filling the entire room with its scream. The guy instantly jumped up, delivering a crushing blow with a heavy hammer. The system issued a coin while the hero looked gloomily at the result. Jinsen inspected the building, planning to take all the useful things. In the end, he sat down tiredly, realizing that there were no goals left. Jinsen looked out the window, hoping that this nightmare would end soon. He believed in the disappearance of the creatures, rejoicing in his rations and sleeping bag. The guy remembered with warmth that Sona had carefully packed her things. Having climbed into the bag, the hero suffered from the bone-piercing cold. Jinsen was worried about the warehouse and the Horde's movement towards Whedon. In complete darkness, he tried to make out the time on his watch. Waking up abruptly, the boy exhaled heavily and listened to the silence. He quickly ate his rations, keeping his eyes on the snow-covered window. Outside, the buildings were covered in snow, and something suddenly caught his attention. Having turned on the flashlight, the hero began to descend for the necessary check. The guy walked into the gym, wondering if they had left in a hurry. He looked at the bat, but decided it would be too much. Jinsen took the balls, thinking that they should definitely be enough. Noticing the shadow, he thought the zombies were simply stuck inside. The creaking of the door revealed a dead body lying right on the floor. The hero reacted instantly, gripping his homemade weapon tighter. The guy found a gas burner, realizing it was not a panel. Jinsen looked around the kitchen, regretting that he couldn't take all the equipment. Soon the hero decided that it was time to return to the snowy center. Jinsen was very happy to see that his bicycle was completely intact. Finally, the hero reached the place he needed. Jinsen saw a sea of hungry and dangerous dead people in front of him. He decided to make his way to the tallest building in the area. The guy noticed traces of a brutal battle and piles of broken glass. Considering the place safe, the hero resolutely moved forward. Jinsen exhaled heavily when he reached the top floor. The brunette froze at door number 2001, looking around. Touching the handle, he realized that the electronic lock was still working. Jinsen was wary of the alarm, so he started looking for another solution. The hero only smiled wearily, realizing the full complexity of his situation. Then he hit the lock with a heavy hammer. The brunette walked inside and began to examine the dark living space. The scattered things suggested that the residents were clearly in a hurry. Jinsen breathed a sigh of relief after making sure there was no one in the apartment. Soon the hero found an induction stove and was very happy with the find. He grabbed the wire, intending to take this useful household device. The guy carefully packed the stove, anticipating a hot meal. Before going out, Jinsen decided to rest a little on the soft bed. He was literally melting, because he hadn't slept on something soft for a long time. The sudden noise made him instantly alert and quickly stand up. Jinsen opened his eyes after hearing a suspicious noise just outside the door. He ran to the window and was very surprised by the sight he saw. The dead were climbing the wall, and the boy realized the reason for the sound. The hero froze, realizing that the creatures wouldn't cling without a reason. In the window opposite, Jinsen noticed the silhouette of some surviving person. The brunette cursed as he saw zombies swarming around the nearby residential building. He felt sorry for the stranger, but the guy didn't help in any way. Jinsen decided to escape quickly while the monsters were still distracted. A loud shot made the hero flinch and turn around sharply. It turned out that an unknown girl was firing aimed fire at the enemies with a rifle. Jinsen realized that the roar of gunfire must have attracted all the nearby dead. Jinsen realized with horror that their situation had become completely hopeless. He felt trapped among a crowd of these hungry creatures. And the stranger continued to fire at the monsters from her rifle. The guy watched with wide eyes as she shot with such damn good aim. The professional mercenary cold-bloodedly shot down the zombies one after another. She confidently gripped the barrel, without showing a drop of unnecessary emotion. Jinsen wondered if this mysterious person was a military man. He figured out how many awards he could earn with her. The guy decided to become her partner for the sake of a gun and survival. The brunette noticed that the stranger still had a lot of bullets left. He decided to wait until the crowd of crazy corpses finally dispersed. Suddenly the boy screamed in fear, seeing something creepy in the window. And then he saw how the horde began to actively gather again. Jinsen realized that the girl in the neighboring house had also stopped shooting. There was food left for the day, and the hero regretted his slowness. The guy settled down for the night, hoping to wait for the moment to escape. However, Jinsen could not fall asleep in this oppressive silence. The brunette forced himself to calm down, believing in a quick, successful outcome. Then Jinsen opened the interface to quickly distract himself from the nightmare. The brunette studied the screen, recognizing many things from his warehouse. The hero noticed a box that cost exactly 10 gold coins. Jinsen decided to take a risk in order to find at least some meaning in life. Suddenly, an explosion thundered in the distance, preventing the guy from saving up the required amount. The brunette jumped to the window, shocked by the bright flames in the sky. He remembered the subway bombers, wondering about the location of the next explosion. The dead suddenly changed course and headed towards the noisy south. The guy saw the creatures retreat and quickly grabbed his backpack. Then he gripped the slab tightly, glad for the sudden chance to escape. The hero moved decisively towards the exit, understanding the importance of every second. Jinsen was breathing heavily, bent over from extreme fatigue after the journey. Then he walked forward, pushing the heavy bicycle in front of him. The guy carefully lowered the vehicle down, trying not to make any noise on the steps. He moved more quietly, holding his precious cargo with his hands. Jinsen slowly crept inside, looking around the dark and cold room. The guy cursed quietly as he saw the crowd of motionless monsters in front of him. The hero frantically thought about how to get rid of these creatures unnoticed. Suddenly the same woman appeared, trying to get out of the building. He wondered with fear why this stranger with a rifle was coming. The blonde watched the dark silhouette of the monster in the snow with cold blood. She raised her rifle confidently, preparing for a possible new attack. Jinsen was amazed by her clarity, mistaking the stranger for an experienced Special Forces soldier. The girl raised her palm, indicating her unwillingness to engage in a fight. The guy tensed up when he noticed she was still holding the gun. The woman asked if he was alone or hiding someone else. The hero slowly reached for the weapon, maintaining extreme caution. Jinsen replied that he was alone, hiding a loaded pistol behind his back. The guy raised his empty hands, confirming his peaceful intentions to the stranger. The interlocutor adjusted the rifle strap, relaxing a little after the tense dialogue. She smiled, admitting that she hadn't seen living people for a long time. Jinsung and Sihyun exchanged names and shook hands firmly. The guy noticed the calluses while the girl was warning about hordes of zombies. Then Sihyun suggested that he sit down and rest for a bit. It turned out that she immediately asked if he was the only one surviving. Jinsen decided to lie, fearing the cool skills of his new companion. He asked in response if Sihyun was also left alone. Sihyun thought back to her army comrades, letting off steam heavily in the cold. The girl added bitterly that all her friends had recently died. It turned out that a wave of monsters had engulfed their former military base. The guy sympathized with her, seeing her hands shaking with pain. Sihyun was angry at the bastard who was to blame for starting this hell. Suddenly she asked where exactly this gloomy guy was heading. The hero hesitated, trying to quickly find the right and necessary words. Jinsen admitted that he was just heading to the abandoned gun shop. The guy added that in this situation, a gun is the best defense. Sihyun agreed that guns would be useful against zombies and marauders. She asked about shooting, and the guy confidently confirmed his skill. Then the blonde silently began to open her heavy backpack. Inside, a pistol and a rifle were found, ready for a heated battle. She laid out the arsenal, asking if her companion was okay now. Sihyun asked how he was feeling, amazed by his bold attack. Jinsen bowed, thanking his new acquaintance for the timely assistance. Sihyun apologized for the bullets, but that was enough for the hero. Suddenly the blonde became serious, preparing to ask one very important question. She asked Jinsen directly where he planned to go now. The guy hesitated, feverishly trying to find the safest answer possible. Jinsen lied about the base, deciding to hide the whole truth for now. Sihyun suddenly suggested to the guy that they join forces and continue their journey together. The girl reasonably noted that it would be much calmer to survive together. Jinsen suspected something was wrong, attributing it to the usual fear of loneliness. The guy decided to use the chance to test the honesty of his new companion. The heroes set off through the deep snow-covered streets of the city. Jinsen suddenly froze when he heard a suspicious noise in the quiet alley. Sihyun instantly delivered a precise, fatal blow with a knife straight to the head. Jinsun was frightened by the purity of her movements, not wanting to become an enemy. The guy praised their skills, as they had already reached the Samgakchi region. The tired blonde suggested making a stop in this quiet place. Si-yeon smiled, enjoying the taste of sweets after that long run. The girl suggested going further, and the guy immediately supported her. Si-yeon decided to focus on searching for food in stores during the day. Jinsun pushed his bicycle, realizing the importance of finding new living supplies. The sudden loud sound of a gunshot made the hero freeze in horror. Si-yeon cursed furiously as she spotted the enemies and quickly ran forward. The guy heard the silencer and wondered about the reasons for this ambush. The girl screamed angrily at the attackers, returning fire from her rifle. The guy rushed towards his companion while dangerous bullets whistled around. Jinsun was shocked by this sudden fight. Si-yeon aimed her gun with concentration, and the boy tried to identify the attackers. The hero shouted out his name, noticing sparks from the bullets hitting the car directly. The armed foreigners ordered the heroes to surrender or die here immediately. Si-yeon fired back furiously, loudly cursing those impudent bastards. Jinsun shouted that shooting would attract the attention of the dangerous dead. An enemy bullet crashed through the glass right in front of the guy. The mercenaries used heavy fire to pin the desperately defending girl to the ground. Si-yeon continued firing, not wanting to surrender to these impudent mercenaries. Jinsun warned that the noise of gunfire would soon bring a horde here. The girl furiously replied that she would never return to those scumbags. The guy froze in shock, looking at her sudden breakdown. Si-yeon screamed that those bastards raped her in the camp. She then added that this was precisely why she decided to run away. Si-yeon fired back, asking if she would lie in hell. Jinsun was agonizing over whether he could truly trust her now. Si-yeon grabbed him tightly while the boy was thinking feverishly. The guy suddenly rushed forward, dodging the bullets whistling over his head. Then he screamed, shielding his head from the bright enemy sparks. In desperation, he screamed for surrender, trying to stop the fight. Soon, the hero fell to his knees in front of soldiers armed to the teeth. At this time, Si-yeon started to run, hiding behind a cold corner. The soldiers shouted furiously, ordering that they open fire on her immediately. The bullet grazed the girl's shoulder, causing her to cry out in pain. The hero realized that the wounded Si-yeon was using him as a shield. The soldiers ran past, paying no attention to Jinsun. The foreigners suddenly asked if he could speak English. Jinsun replied that he understood a little and could speak. Brian asked if the guy was Callie's partner. The soldier explained that this woman had just been here. The mercenary chuckled when he learned about the girl's lie about her name. Brian added angrily that the woman was blatantly lying. He then explained that she had killed 6 of their people. Jinsun was completely confused, not knowing who to trust now. The soldier reported that the target was lost due to a sudden attack by the Horde. The commander ordered to leave while his comrades held back the crowd of dead. Brian turned, gesturing for the boy to remain completely calm. Jinsun thanked them, realizing the mortal danger near Si-yeon. The mercenaries picked up the things, surprised by the weight and softness of the backpack. Jinsun watched in horror as the soldiers unceremoniously grabbed his backpack. He was painfully aware that he was about to lose all his valuable supplies. In desperation, he shouted out, forbidding these people to take the bag. The soldiers looked sternly, continuing to hold his belongings tightly. The mercenary rudely asked if the guy had stolen their gun. Jinsun was worried, realizing that it was impossible to get the backpack back by force. The hero looked at those standing in front of him in complete silence. The guy swallowed nervously, waiting for the decision of these stern mercenaries. The group leader unexpectedly handed Jinsun his bag of supplies. Jinsun took his backpack, sincerely thanking the people for their help. The mercenaries left, wishing to meet again alive. Left alone, the guy decided that it was time to return quickly. Jinsun got on his bike and rode along the snowy road. The boy discovered the bullet hole, realizing that the way home was long. Jinsun coughed from the cold as he continued his journey through the snowstorm. Jinsun checked the map and decided to quickly mask the smell. He then noticed the coins, realizing that Sona had been fighting hard. It turned out that the system automatically combined them into one group. The guy suddenly realized that the survivors in the warehouse could have been killed. Remembering the mutants, he understood their eerie direction towards Whedon. Jinsun was horrified by the base breakthrough and screamed in complete despair. After this, the guy rushed with all his might to save his friends. Sweating profusely, he prayed that he could help in time. At this time, the people at the base saw the Horde in horror. The locks clicked as the monsters began to tear at the heavy chains. Sona and her partner desperately tried to hold the gate against the onslaught. Suddenly, clawed paws grabbed the frightened boy's clothes. A loud scream rang out as the monsters broke the last chains. His companion dragged him inside, shouting that defending the entrance was useless. The girl suggested blocking the stairs, hoping that the zombies would be slow. The bespectacled man objected that the creatures could easily climb up the slopes. The heroes realized that a grueling war in the passage awaited them. The girl ordered to quickly take weapons for a long defense of the camp. The man gripped the handle of the heavy machete tightly with trembling hands. And then he cowardly suggested dropping everything and running away. Sona asked in shock why he was even talking like that now. After this, Sona suddenly grabbed her partner by the chest. The girl reminded them of the agreement to defend the base until the leader returned. The guy explained that first they needed to survive themselves. Sona firmly stated that she would stand at her post until the end. Then Sona extended her hand to her frightened assistant again. She ordered him to forget about escaping and take the weapon. Sona added that it is easier to defend positions than to recapture them later. The guy sighed heavily and rubbed his head tiredly from stress. In the end, he agreed to try to hold out against the Horde. Sona ran up while her companion asked her to wait a bit. The girl froze, noticing a mysterious biker below, right next to the fence. Soon the driver seemed frighteningly and strangely familiar to her. The motorcyclist stood silently, blinding everything around him with the bright light of his headlights. The heroine's gaze was filled with horror from a sudden and terrible guess. The taut chains snapped with a roar under the powerful pressure of the crowd. Bloodthirsty monsters poured into the courtyard, filling everything with wild screams. Sona screamed that the gates couldn't hold and were now broken. People were panicking and couldn't understand where so many zombies came from. The bespectacled man in black hoped for the strength of the glass on the first floor. The creatures burst inside, causing the survivors to scream wildly in fear. A hungry horde of monsters instantly filled the passage, foreshadowing a bloody massacre. The maddened infected screamed, finally losing the last vestiges of their human nature. Fresh blood on the wall silently screamed about the recent massacre. Jinsen had hoped to meet singles, but the reality turned out to be much harsher. Then the guy noticed the torn chains and the gates thrown wide open. Horror instantly gripped the hero at the sight of the open entrance. Jinsen realized in despair that everything had gone to hell. Meanwhile, Sona furiously chopped at the enemies with her trusty spear. The girl exhaled wearily, standing on a mountain of dead bodies. Jinsen froze in the room, which had turned into a branch of real hell. Wild horror was reflected on his face at the bloody carnage. It turned out that the survivors' belongings were still in place, and then he rushed in panic into the depths of the dark office. The hero desperately shouted out the names of his friends, trying to find at least someone. The empty corridors were silent, because there was no one in the building. He never found any traces of the zombies breaking through further. The painful guess made his heart freeze with wild fear. The boy closed his eyes, praying that reality would turn out to be just a bad nightmare. Suddenly, Jinsen froze as he recognized the familiar voice of the assistant manager. The stunned Sona and her assistant immediately recognized the guest as one of their own. The happy girl flew into the arms of her senior colleague. The exhausted boy drank greedily, rejoicing in the strength of the tempered glass doors. Sona said that she had the idea to leave a narrow gap for defense. The heavy chains closed, turning the ordinary room into a secure fortress. Now all that was left was to silently watch the hell raging in the street. The armored entrance became a reliable shield for people from monsters. Soon, Choi's assistant suddenly shouted out his legendary phrase. He loudly ordered to pull and not push the damn bastards. The barricade of corpses deprived the zombies of any hope of breaking through. They locked the door again and hid until the creatures disappeared. Then the guys went to get some metal to fix the broken gate. After hard work, they finally rested and drank tea. Jinsen smiled contentedly, because he had obtained everything he needed. The guy reminded his friends about the stove they had seen earlier. These spare parts were enough to assemble a generator for the base. Sona gently noted that the guy had been through a lot, and then he decided to show the main highlight of the whole program. The friends froze and even jokingly asked for a drumroll. The backpack contained a real firearm, which shocked everyone around. Sona asked about the store, but the guy only briefly refused. The brunette mysteriously promised that his story would definitely shock everyone. He admitted that he still doesn't believe what happened. The heroine sympathized, but he simply considered himself damn lucky. The assistant immediately inquired about dinner, noticing their suspiciously satisfied faces. The bespectacled man's gaze was filled with delight at this incredible sight. Jinsen triumphantly pulled out the chicken, causing his friends to scream with joy. The survivors began to dance, anticipating their first feast in a long time. The fatty meat began to brown tantalizingly in the heart of the fire. Sona was simply going crazy from the smell of fried poultry. The trio pounced on the food greedily, celebrating a small victory. The guys breathed a blissful sigh, having finally had their fill of the juicy, hot chicken. Sona noted wistfully that there was a certain charm to this chaos. The friends discussed whether it was worth returning to the old world at all. Jinsen snapped back that he wanted to return home as soon as possible. Sona laughed, calling such doubts a truly stupid idea. Assistant Choi dreamed of beer, complaining of the boredom that had come over him. They were cheerfully planning a daring raid on the warehouse of a local brewery. Suddenly, the assistant remembered about that strange guy on the motorcycle. Jinsen tensed up when he realized that Sona had seen the biker's face. Jinsen was taken aback by the truth when Sona confirmed it. The girl seriously explained that the enemy worked in their company. The shocked guy asked her again, not believing in such a coincidence. Sona recalled the scandalous intern who came through connections. That guy suddenly quit his job right in the middle of his internship. The friends struggled to remember the name of that mysterious colleague. Soon, the name of Park Min-tae was announced as the main suspect. It turns out that Min-tae is the son of their influential director. Jinsen raised his hand sharply, ordering his friends to be quiet and wait. The bespectacled man was horrified by the zombie leader's connection with their company. The hero began to doubt, assuming that the attacker was someone completely different. He asked his friends if they had heard about the family secret. It turned out that the scandalous intern has a twin brother. It turned out that the owner of the corporation had 2 sons since birth. The older brother was only famous for his dirty club stories and addiction. The younger Min Song was considered a genius in biochemical sciences. Jinsen recalled that the scientist's trail had been lost upon his return. The bespectacled man became nervous, trying to figure out the identity of the mysterious biker. The comrades wondered which of the brothers had caused this bloody chaos. Jinsen suspected that the brilliant biologist was involved in the disaster. The boys were taken aback when the frightening guess turned out to be the absolute truth. Sona confirmed this, citing her keen eye. Jinsen decided to keep this dangerous secret between the 3 of them. Soon the bespectacled man found a new suspicious post on the forum. The boys noticed an article about the secrets of a strange Western shelter. The leaked footage clearly showed the activities of a real sect. The sectarians under the banner of Jira loudly trumpeted about the end of the world. A crazed mob of cultists forcibly seized Incheon Airport. Then Jinsen silently listened to Sona's arguments about the convenience of the airport. And in the end, the assistant manager decided to personally sort everything out. He warned his friends against contact with dangerous sectarians. The guy promised to collect information and report only the important things. Jinsen exhaled heavily in the cold, collecting his thoughts. The group realized that they needed to address this headache. The hero decided to resolve the problem as quietly and quickly as possible. Then Jinsen began to pull back the heavy bars with great effort. Sona watched carefully as the strong metal gave way. Abandoned work tools lay scattered in disarray on the snow. After 6 hours of work, the friends collapsed helplessly into the snow. Sona was relieved to see that they were almost done. Sona chuckled contentedly, considering their work quite worthy. She emphasized that the design of the opening was particularly successful. The girl called a double door the best solution for protection. Jinsen nodded approvingly, confirming the success of this cool idea. Then the boys hurried inside, wondering about their comrade's success. A bicycle, converted into a strange mechanism, gleamed in the room. Friends were stunned by the homemade product, recognizing the idea as brilliant. The bespectacled man proudly explained that the bike generator was producing electricity at full capacity. He specially placed it near the window for convenient observation. Jinsen wearily asked for the physics of the work to be explained in a much simpler manner. The bespectacled man admitted that the effectiveness of his homemade device was completely worthless. Sona immediately clarified how long the charge of this thing would last. It turned out that a whole hour of torment would only provide crumbs of warmth. A friend promised that now the phones will always be charged. Sona appreciated the coolness of the idea of generating electricity without solar panels. Jinsen thanked the guy for taking a risk for the sake of the induction cooker he needed. The hero gave the craftsman a friendly hug, praising him for his excellent work. The boys chatted heartily as the sky was painted by a bright winter sunset. Later, Jinsen settled in the system, searching for goods to defend the base. He spat on saving and daringly pressed the buy button. The system returned an empty result for the request for protective equipment. An attempt to order a pistol through a search was also unsuccessful. The guy switched to trackers, hoping to find at least some clue. The hero's gaze frantically froze on the bright glow of the system screen. He was glad of the chance to track all enemies and his own when separated. After confirming the purchase, Jinsen rushed straight down the stairs. Suddenly he drew his weapon, realizing the reality of the impending mortal threat. The partner screamed, trying to quickly wake up his frozen leader. Sunbae pressed his sights to the rifle's scope, preparing to cover his comrades. Jinsen and Sona readied their guns, waiting for the 2 uninvited guests to appear. Sona trembled as she admitted she had never held a gun before. Jinsen told me to just aim and pull the trigger of the gas weapon. The guy patiently helped Sonya aim, convincing her of the simplicity of the matter. Sona looked alarmed, realizing the mortal danger of this moment. Jinsen forbade opening fire while the uninvited guests stood still. He intended to pull the trigger only in any emergency. The girl nodded in response, confirming her complete readiness for action. Then the hero ordered Sonya to carefully watch her signs. Suddenly, Jinsen saw someone's approaching figures in the snowy darkness. The hero was stunned when he recognized the silhouettes of an adult and a child. The bespectacled man noticed the targets and signaled with his fingers to his comrades. Sona confirmed the absence of enemies, and Jinsen only nodded seriously. Jinsen told his companion to be ready, and she instantly concentrated. The hero pointed the gun at the guests, ordering them to stand still. The elderly man in the hood froze, taken aback by the sharp shout. A small child in a bright orange down jacket stood frozen in fear nearby. It turned out that the old man was simply leading his little granddaughter through the cold. The traveler raised his hands, calling himself and the girl ordinary refugees. Jinsen asked sullenly from where exactly they came from. The old man told about the destroyed shelter and the long search for salvation. The old man begged for help, showing his only old axe. The travelers confirmed that there was no one else except the two of them. Jinsen thought hard under Sona's worried and quiet gaze. The guy told Sonia to step back and watch carefully from cover. The hero took aim at the gate while the girl obediently retreated. Jinsen carefully touched the handle, preparing to let in these uninvited guests. He swung the door open sharply, without lowering his loaded weapon. Jinsen ordered the survivors to approach him slowly and carefully. Then he ordered the old man to close the door tightly behind him. The hero ordered the travelers to wait, while the frightened girl sought protection. The girl offered to let the old man and his child in, since there would be enough food for everyone. Choi countered, reminding him that in this world, people often betray. Sona felt sorry for the travelers, who looked extremely exhausted and hungry. The guy with glasses snapped that pity was not a reason to take risks. A fierce battle of arguments began, mercy versus cold calculation and fear. The group froze in tension, realizing that everyone was right in their own way. Suddenly, Sunbae broke off the argument, deciding to let the strangers in after all. Sona screamed joyfully while Assistant Choi stood in complete stupor. The leader then hugged Choi, explaining the urgent need for new people. He emphasized that the strong old man would help them clear the rubble, and the child, in the hero's opinion, will be able to help the group on duty. Then Sona happily clapped Jinsung's hand in agreement. Soon a gray backpack was passed through the fence bars for inspection. The heroes examined the stranger's belongings under the watchful eye of Jinsen. Sona confirmed that the people who arrived were completely clean and safe. The guy invited them in, keeping his hand cautiously on his pistol. The rescued began to bow low, endlessly thanking their new saviors. It turned out that the old man and the child had not eaten for 2 days. Jinsen immediately led the guests inside, deciding to feed them first. A pot of hot ramen and a portion of rice appeared on the table. The old man kindly asked his granddaughter not to rush while eating. Having eaten her fill, the baby instantly fell asleep under a warm blanket. Sona was touched, looking at the serene face of the sleeping girl. Jinsen began to ask the old man about the route out of their city. The man replied that they had come a long way from Yangju. It turned out that this mysterious old man had previously been a professional hunter. He specified that he mainly hunted wild boars. The Trinity immediately suspected that this old man was not so simple. The building was plunged into the silence of the night, accompanied by the howling of the icy wind. Sona sympathized with the old man who had lost his children and was left with his granddaughter. Jinsen found the old man's story to be true and found no suspicion. Then the hero cordially invited the travelers to stay with them. The hunter was genuinely amazed by the kindness, expecting a quick exile into the cold. The guy smiled, calling on everyone to help each other for survival. The old man thanked Jinsen warmly, squeezing his warm hand tightly. He volunteered to do any work, wanting to be useful to the group. The rescued were allowed to rest and recuperate all day. The girl slept peacefully, finally safe and warm. Choi secretly watched the guests, trying to guess their intentions. Soon, the grandfather decisively declared that he was ready to get down to business. The old man wanted to be useful despite his advanced age. The grandfather invited his granddaughter to ride his light-up bike later. Then Jinsen and the hunter set out into the cold, snowy forest. The old man noticed that there was plenty of excellent dry wood around. He carefully examined the frozen ground and the tall trees around him. The hunter nodded approvingly, choosing a tree for firewood. When his grandfather swung the axe, Jinsen in horror ordered him to stop. The hunter froze in bewilderment and asked what had happened. The guy strictly forbade cutting down trees, greatly surprising his companion. Jinsen explained that the noise of the axe would attract a crowd of hungry zombies. Fresh stumps could give away their location to dangerous strangers. Jinsen finished collecting dry branches into his backpack. During the gathering, the heroes started talking about their difficult past. It turned out that the old man's granddaughter also lost her parents early. The guy noted that the girl was very lucky to have her grandfather. The old man vowed to live as long as possible for her sake. Jinsen wondered if he would ever see her grow up. The hero felt confident in their common survival. The little girl joyfully threw herself into the arms of her grandfather, who had returned from a mission. She boasted that she rode a light-up bike for an hour. Jinsun dropped the bundle of firewood under the watchful eye of Choi's assistant. Choi smiled contentedly, appreciating the sincerity and reliability of his new ally. The hero convinced Choi that the old man could now be trusted. Jinsun offered to give the old man a rifle to better protect the camp. Choi agreed, admitting his complete failure in shooting training. The granddaughter was surprised that her grandfather suddenly changed his old hat. It turned out that the boy nobly gave the old man his warm attire. The hero insisted on the gift, not listening to his grandfather's timid objections. The hunter tried on the gift and warmly thanked the boy for his kindness. Jinsun laughed it off cheerfully, citing his hot young blood. The system notified about the acceptance of a new member into the squad. Jinsun's face suddenly distorted with the onset of horror. Prices in the store have risen sharply due to the expansion of the group. The guy turned pale, realizing that everything had gone up in price by a coin. Choi asked worriedly what had happened to his partner. Jinsun cited fatigue after the arduous task of gathering food. At night, the hero realized that the system had staged a real robbery. The growing number of squad members inexorably increases store prices. The random box now cost 11 coins instead of 10. Jinsun stared at the shining surprise box in despair. Jinsun purchased an expensive information report from the system. The guy gave 11 coins for one piece of paper. He frantically wondered what important secret was hidden there. The report predicted the death of many people in the future. The text described the conditions for the emergence of new dangerous mutants. The system warned of a catastrophic snowstorm in 2 weeks. The hero suddenly jumped out of bed from disturbing thoughts. The morning found Jinsun after a hard and sleepless night. He anxiously asked Sona, who was running past, about what had happened. The girl replied that a wild boar had wandered into their house at night. Jinsun was afraid that the boar had entered their warehouse. Sona explained that her grandfather found him while he was on duty. The hunter resolutely set out to deal with the wild, uninvited guest. Defeating the beast earned the group 2 valuable system coins. Soon the survivors were enjoying a hot breakfast of rice and side dishes. Choi proposed building a staircase to protect against new threats. He was afraid that the enemies would be able to climb over the high wall. The assistant conceived the idea of creating a powerful replica of a medieval siege tower. Jinsun approved of the idea and expressed his complete trust in his friend. Then the hero seriously announced that he had more news. The group split up to collect firewood and food in the forest. The men moved deeper into the thicket, looking for traces of something useful. Soon they found a clearing strewn with large dry branches. The elderly partner filled his backpack with firewood, rejoicing at his quick success. The heroes decided to return here again while they had the opportunity. Suddenly they felt that there was someone else lurking in the forest. The man peered out from behind the tree warily, clutching his pistol tightly. The spear-wielding companion noticed movement to the northwest of them. A fanged forest deer emerged from the snowy shroud towards them. People were amazed at how the animal was able to survive the abnormal frost. The partner called the appearance of a live animal in such cold a rarity. Jinsun looked at the deer silently, feeling a growing sense of unease inside him. He remembered that he had never seen animals before, even in the city. The companion admitted that he dreams of catching the animal and feeding the group. Suddenly the boy noticed something frightening in the deer's deep eyes. The fanged monster let out a wild cry and rushed to attack. The partner shouted, ordering Jinsun to step back immediately. The fighter resolutely declared that he would quickly deal with the creature himself. He thrust out his spear, blocking the path of the monster as it rushed forward. The sharp blade pierced the deer's skull, splattering blood everywhere. And then the mutant collapsed onto the snow, struck down by a precise blow. Jinsun finally realized the reason for his growing anxiety. The beast looked too plump for the conditions of total starvation. The companion added gloomily that the oddities did not end there. He emphasized that the defeated creature did not make a sound. The fighters were shocked to discover that the forest monster was not even breathing. The guys seriously doubted whether this creature could be considered a deer. The people decided to leave the suspicious corpse and quickly get away. The partner hastily agreed, not wanting to stay in the thicket any longer. Later, the group discussed the strange disappearance of all the stray cats. Sona, with plates in her hands, asked about the meaning of what was happening. Jinsun remained silent, afraid that his theory would only cause confusion. The hero suggested they take a rest, because they had a lot to do tomorrow. Jae-sung, wearing glasses, found a post about finding new travel companions. Jinsun was surprised that people still posted such messages. The bespectacled man explained that survivors now rarely meet in person. People from different regions simply share ideas online. Jinsun noted that the online community is gradually coming to life and growing. It became clear that people find ways to survive everywhere. The brunette thoughtfully called Jae-sung to continue the important conversation. The guy in glasses explained that temporary numbers are valid for 24 hours. It turned out that some people recognized each other online from pictures. Jinsen thanked for the warning about the possible forgery of other people's profiles. Jinsen seriously considered using the site to exchange data. The survivors' gallery contained lists of information available for sharing. Jinsen confidently led his partner through the dense thickets of the winter forest. The companions collected branches, discussing the old man's excellent knowledge of the forest. Byom-gyu confirmed that this was the place where the deer was found. A sudden guess made Jinsen turn around sharply and become very wary. The guy was perplexed as he searched for the corpse, which suddenly disappeared without a trace. Byom-gyu noticed with puzzlement that there were no bloodstains on the snow. Jinsen remembered that there was no snowfall at all last night. The old man was frightened by the lack of tracks on the supposedly fresh layer of snow. The rabbit was shaking with rage and showing clear signs of terrible zombification. The heroes stared in amazement at the crazy little creature beneath their feet. Jinsen was horrified to see the living animal with its hind legs torn off. The companions realized that their worst suspicions about the virus had been confirmed. Byom-gyu wondered why the infection suddenly started to affect the animals. The girl showed a screen where her pet had also turned into a zombie. It turned out that the animals become infected by eating the flesh of already infected creatures. The survivors decided not to eat the animals, so as not to take unnecessary risks. Jinsen suggested that animals might mutate in the same way. The group became terrified at the thought of new dangerous neighbors. Jinsen urged caution when the old man suddenly interrupted him. Byom-gyu stated seriously that he had something important to tell him. The guy was shocked by the news about the need to completely clear the forest. The old man confirmed the shortage of branches, which had been collected since the summer. Jinsen looked at the boxes with extremely small supplies with bitterness. The hero finally realized that it was time to finally pick up the axe. Then the partners set off together to dangerously collect firewood. Jinsen greeted the boy. Jinsen inquired about the possibility of producing another type of weapon. The hero explained the lack of equipment for effective ranged combat. The master warned that the noise of gunshots would provoke an influx of bloodthirsty creatures. The engineer was deep in thought about creating a quiet and reliable device. Sona clarified how difficult it would be to assemble a functioning combat crossbow. The girl ironically noted the limitations of her friend's engineering skills. Jinsen redirected the question to the experienced hunter, trusting in his skill. Byom-gyu hesitated, causing the group to briefly doubt the success of the undertaking. Ultimately, the engineer confirmed that the crossbow project was entirely feasible. The engineer's unexpected confession left the entire group in shock. The bespectacled man admitted that he is a passionate fan of any weapon. He spoke enthusiastically about his attempts to assemble a medieval crossbow. The master warned about long work without the right tools. Sona and Jinsen were genuinely impressed by their comrade's hidden talents. After the conversation, the friends immediately set out to search for supplies. Jinsen breathed heavily as he worked in the forest in the bitter cold. The guy collapsed onto a rock, completely exhausted from the chopping. The frozen trees yielded to the axe extremely slowly and reluctantly. Jinsen looked around, suddenly losing sight of Byom-gyu. Byom-gyu flew out of the thicket, desperately shouting Jinsong's name. Then the old man collapsed in front of him, gasping for icy air. Jinsen tensed up and asked if they should prepare for battle. The old man waved his hands in denial, trying to calm his frantic heartbeat. Then he pointed wearily to the other side of the snowy valley. Byom-gyu exhaled that he had discovered some strange village there. The hunter added that things were clearly not going smoothly with this settlement. The heroes stared together into the void, shrouded in the deathly cold of winter. They froze, their eyes carefully scanning every suspicious snowdrift ahead. Jinsen nodded sharply, noticing some movement right in front of them. Jinsen confirmed that there was a snow-covered, abandoned camp ahead. The old man noticed that several people still lived there. Satellites discovered fresh tracks and smoldering coals in a brazier. Jinsen suddenly dove behind a tree, ordering Byom-gyu to wait. The guy spotted the man and gestured towards 3 o'clock. Unknown persons were dragging the carcass of an animal that looked like yesterday's deer. The survivors then realized that the strangers had caught the animal for food. The old man reminded us how deadly it is to try to eat contaminated meat. Byom-gyu only gloomily confirmed his partner's frightening suspicions. Jinsen decided not to inform the unfortunate people about the terrible threat for now. Jinsen kept quiet, not wanting to give himself away too early. Sona dried her hair, recalling the cozy tents of the local glamping site. Jinsen listened attentively about the camp nestled under a steep cliff. It turned out that these tents were equipped with the comfort of a real hotel. Sona explained that the rocks in the cemetery were preventing them from getting to them. Jinsen's face darkened, realizing the inevitability of an imminent meeting with strangers. The girl wondered why those people were even going into the forest. Jinsen realized that the fresh stumps would quickly give away their secret hideout. Byom-gyu asked Sonu to personally check the situation in the camp tomorrow. The old man smiled slyly, praising his young partner's keen eyesight. Sona noticed a group of about 10 people ahead. Jinsen inquired about the situation, and Sona called it strange. The people in the camp looked surprisingly normal and ordinary. Sona looked closely, trying to find a hidden catch in them. The girl was horrified by the absolute lack of any emotion on their faces. The strangers worked in silence, showing no human feelings at all. Jinsen admitted that 10 emotionless people are very alarming. The heroes felt uneasy because of the eerie atmosphere of this place. Sona continued to watch the frightening and silent spectacle in a daze. In the silence, people moved mechanically, like soulless puppets. The little girl looked out from behind the edge of the high windowsill in surprise. She joyfully watched through the window as the elders approached. Sona recalled with a shudder the eerie faces of the puppet people. Byom-gyu's little granddaughter rushed enthusiastically to meet her little sister. Sona gently picked up the girl, hugging her tightly. The girl kindly asked if the little girl had played well enough. The child was bragging about the long ride on their new homemade contraption. Suddenly the girl began to sniff Sona's hair carefully. The baby was genuinely surprised by the changed and very strange smell. Sona froze in shock, frightened by the child's sudden remark. Sona worriedly asked Jinsong if she smelled something. The girl smelled a musty odor instead of the usual aroma of ripe fruit. Sona wondered in horror if the strange stench was coming from the others. The little girl was perplexed, because in the forest she had carefully observed hygiene. Jinsen stood silently, pondering the frightening words of his little companion. Sona abruptly changed the subject, pulling everyone to dinner quickly. The guy had a gloomily presentiment of an imminent storm after the false hope of the people. Jinsen understood that only a few would survive the coming icy hard labor. The hero passed on the information, leaving the decision to the conscience of the other survivors. Friends suddenly called out to Jinsen as he stood on the stairs. Friends happily told Jinsen the latest news about the end of the Ice Age. But he stopped them, warning them not to make noise ahead of time. Sona agreed, realizing that trouble could happen at any moment. Jinsen added gloomily that this was only the calm before the storm. He realized his harshness, but preparing for survival was more important. 6 days later, Byom-gyu fell ill with severe body aches. Soon the group set out in full force to search for provisions. On the 5th day, luck finally smiled upon them with food. The partners suddenly noticed someone and called Jinsen to come closer. The hero froze, genuinely surprised by the unexpected find in the snow. They peered into the snowy darkness for a long time, but saw nothing. The partner doubted whether it was a person or a zombie hiding in the snowdrifts. He suggested the existence of another village, but Jinsen quickly objected. The camera's zoom revealed that they were being closely watched. Jinsen gloomily stated that the mysterious guest suddenly disappeared from sight. The friend reasoned that any shelter would have to be changed sooner or later. The group decided to quickly transfer all the supplies they found to the base. Along the way, they came across strange children's targets on sticks. The partner called them pathetic, trying to hide the growing excitement inside. Then he prepared a white cloth and asked the hero if it was ready. The friend excitedly promised to show Jinsen a real technical masterpiece. Then he dramatically tore off the fabric, revealing a powerful homemade crossbow. Jinsen appreciated the rough metal, and the creator was pleased with such a sincere reaction. The comrade explained that the prototype is only effective when fired at direct fire. He later showed off a meager supply of 10 hastily made bolts. The shells were hard to come by, so the heroes decided to go for materials soon. Jinsen picked up the heavy weapon and was surprised by its impressive weight. The partner commanded to rest the crossbow on the ground, putting his foot in the stirrup. The hero pulled the bowstring with great difficulty, recognizing the complexity of the powerful mechanism. A friend praised the excellent tension and expressed anticipation for the test. A friend suggested shooting, and Jinsen decisively pulled the trigger. The heavy bolt whistled away into the thick snow-covered darkness. The sudden explosion made Jinsen turn around warily towards the noise. Sona hugged the frightened girl, assuring her that everything was calm nearby. She screamed when she noticed a bright flash over the forest near the village. The partner offered to scout out the situation, but the hero sharply rebuffed him. Jinsen realized that the noise of the explosion would attract all the nearby dead. He noted gloomily that their warehouse was right in the way. A huge crowd of hungry monsters could already be heading towards them. The hero climbed up the watchtower, peering into the gray distance. From the tower, Jinsen ordered his partner to prepare for the imminent appearance of enemies. Shadows appeared in the distance, and he confirmed that they were coming. And then a huge crowd of zombies rushed straight down the snowy road. A sharp spear whistled through the frosty air as it flew towards the monsters. The weapon pierced the first dead man, pinning him to the rubble. Sona and Byom-gyu took up positions, preparing for a bloody fight. Jinsen froze in horror, noticing something truly creepy in the crowd. Among the ordinary zombies, a huge mutant in a torn dress towered. And then the terrible creature quickly headed straight for their shelter. Jinsen cursed as he realized the alarming speed at which this dangerous horde was approaching. The creature climbed upward. Jinsen took aim, not planning to test the crossbow so soon. The bowstring snapped loudly and the bolt fell into the void. The projectile flew past, barely missing the mutant's shoulder. The guy cursed, realizing that he had made a huge mistake. He frantically pulled the bowstring, trying to reload the weapon as quickly as possible. The hero desperately pressed on the lever, begging the mechanism to work. Reloading was too slow, causing the boy to curse the device. Jinsen froze, focusing his extremely cold gaze on the target. He ordered himself to calm down, forbidding the mutant to enter inside. Finally, the shutter clicked, and Jinsen happily celebrated the success. Noticing the enemy's maneuver, he decided to sharply deviate his trajectory. The new bolt came off, perfectly maintaining the direction the guy had set. A powerful blow threw the bloodthirsty monster far back. Jinsen was surprised by the unexpected killing power of his new acquisition. The guy decided to later be sure to thank Jaesung for his help. At this time, Jaesung was furiously fighting off the mutants with a spear. The guy's glasses were splattered with blood, but he remained calm. The sharp blade sank deep into the flesh of another monster. The mutilated creature fell dead, struck down by a precise and powerful blow. The old man began to climb the wall. Byung-gyu met the huge mutant with a spear at the ready. The monster finally fell dead onto the cold concrete. The girl flew up to her grandfather, inquiring about his wounds. The old man gloomily noted the frightening vitality of these new creatures. Sona agreed that it had become more difficult to pierce their tough skin. Jinsen realized with horror that the supply of bolts had run out. He looked around the city, plunged into icy chaos. The hero swallowed hard, feeling his strength finally leaving him. Right in front of him, a whole crowd of hungry monsters was swarming. The nightmare finally ended, leaving the cold snow strewn with the bodies of monsters. They survived thanks to fortifications and timely arrival of reinforcements. The group survived, but the number of dangerous mutants increased sharply. The hero received the reward and thought about buying a random box. Sona breathed heavily as she trudged along after the long battle. Jinsen turned around abruptly, noticing a strange flash of light in the twilight. The granddaughter signaled with a flashlight, warning of approaching strangers. Jinsen ordered everyone to prepare for the visit of uninvited guests. Byung-gyu immediately ran up to provide fire cover for the group. And then Jinsen himself moved towards the entrance to intercept. Jinsen raised his empty crossbow, remembering that there were no bolts. A lonely guy ran through the snow, constantly looking back. Jaesung was amazed to see a living person among the snow. The bloodied, unarmed stranger frantically fled. Jinsen searched the bag, but the ammunition was completely gone. He decided to use the empty crossbow for the sake of simple intimidation. The exhausted boy continued his desperate run through the snowdrifts. Byung-gyu and Jaesung prepared to face the potential threat. The fugitive froze in horror when he saw the weapon in front of him. Jinsen raised his crossbow and sternly ordered the stranger to stand. The bloodied guy approached the camp in panic. Jinsen threatened to shoot him if he dared to move. The little girl watched the people leaving down the corridor from around the corner. She told Jinsen that her grandfather had simply gone to the toilet. The girl approached the hero, intending to tell him something important. She added seriously that it should be their secret. The guy warned her that he smelled bad now too. The girl just blinked her eyes in surprise, not understanding his words. She clarified that the man had a strange, musty smell. A dejected stranger with a mug in his hands agreed to tell everything. The man recalled their survival in a campsite with a small group of families. Returning with the spoils, he joyfully called out to a certain Sujin. At home, he was met by his loving wife and little happy daughter. He explained that they were lucky to find food early today. The family was genuinely proud of his success in finding supplies. Then he kissed his daughter tenderly, hearing words of love. That day started out as a completely ordinary and calm one. Then they were happy with the gas reserves and the hot shower. Soon the idol was suddenly shattered into pieces by an explosion. A powerful flame destroyed his entire past in a second. The man lay unconscious on the floor in the cold snow. Coming to his senses, he opened his pain-filled eyes with difficulty. The hero trembled, painfully trying to comprehend the scale of the disaster that had occurred. All around him lay the silent ruins of their former refuge. A heavy slab crushed him, preventing him from getting out from under the rubble. Finally, he stood up and in despair shouted the names of his relatives. He soon froze, noticing his wife and daughter under the rubble. The relatives lay motionless, buried under the collapsed structures of the house. He rushed towards the bodies in horror, fearing the worst. The man grabbed his wife's hand, desperately hoping for a spark of life. The man finally realized that his relatives were dead. He sat in the snow, unable to accept the nightmarish reality. The hero touched his daughter's head, not understanding the reasons for what had happened. The last warmth left the girl's body, and the hairpin fell off. He just held her tightly and sobbed inconsolably. Soon he called out furiously to his neighbor, suddenly recognizing him. The man suspected that it was this stranger who caused the explosion. Then he gripped the pole with determination, wanting to take revenge on his enemy. The hero climbed outside to look the killer in the face. He spotted Dongyu ahead and called out to him angrily. The boy screamed desperately when he saw his brother in the thick of things. Soon the fatal shots rang out, destroying the last hope. The man in the hat fell into the snow under fire. Then the hero bent over the wounded Hyung in horror, and then he picked it up, trying to carry it away. His face froze in the realization of utter hopelessness. Later he sat in blood, numb from what he saw. It was then that he noticed that mysterious blonde. She methodically shot every inhabitant of their village she encountered, so he just started running for his life. The blonde opened fire, ordering everyone to immediately freeze in place. And then Dongyu shamefully ran away like the last coward. The man showed the survivors a commemorative hairpin belonging to his deceased little daughter. The stranger remembered the daughter's order to her father to survive at all costs. Hearing this, Sona burst into tears, unable to contain her emotions. Jinsen became suspicious, wondering about the reasons for Kelly's attack on the village. The hero lamented that she had not come to the village for resources. Then the guest tearfully asked permission to stay with them for just one day. Jinsen and Sona looked at each other silently, considering the man's unexpected request. Finally, the guy allowed him to rest while he made his own decision. Jinsen stood silently in the corridor, lost in dark thoughts. Suddenly, Byung-gyu shuddered in fear, noticing the hero behind him. The old man quietly asked the boy about his impressions of the uninvited guest. Jinsen replied that he was not sure, and that the guest would not stay long. Byung-gyu sensed the guest's lie and asked the guy about his plans. The hero decided to check whether Baek Dong-gyu had told him the truth. The old man only asked anxiously if the guy was really going to leave. Then Kelly rushed into the room with the zombie's body. The blonde coldly announced that she would go to the village right now.